Chapter 1439. The Insect Queen had left. She wasn't willing to join the alliance. Since that was the case, Qin couldn't accept her either. No one knew whether the Insect Queen had come to help the Holy Emperor or to take revenge on him. He wasn't interested in the love and hate between the Holy Emperor and the Insect Queen. He didn't want to know or participate in it. All he wanted to do was to maintain the stability of the team. Speaking of which, Qin really felt that the Holy Emperor and the Insect Queen were a little too nonsensical. One was a dignified existence, while the other was an immortal spirit of a divine artifact. These two had lived for tens of thousands of years, yet they were acting like a couple who had broken up. It was truly shocking. Although there were no laws in the universe that stated that supreme existences or people who had lived for tens of thousands of years weren't allowed to fall in love, Qin felt that it was better to avoid this kind of trouble at such a crucial time. After the Insect Queen left, Chang Tian asked Qin, "You don't welcome the Insect Queen because she isn't willing to join the alliance?" Qin nodded. "I came up with the alliance in order to eliminate any unstable factors as much as possible. Since the Insect Queen isn't willing to join the alliance, it means that she's an unstable factor. That's why I can't accept her, even if it will cause us to lose a major force." Chang Tian nodded after hearing Qin's answer. "You're right. For us now, stability is the most important." Qin didn't gossip about the Insect Queen's visit to the Holy Emperor. He knew that even if he didn't say anything, the Holy Emperor would have sensed her arrival. It was best if he didn't get involved in this kind of thing. Time quickly passed. Under Galaska's lead, the Void Race finally completed the last step of opening the portal. Qin and the others gathered below the portal. They looked up at the huge, dark purple formation in the sky. Now, they only needed to inject any kind of energy into the portal. As long as it was strong enough, the portal could be opened. "Everyone, are you ready? The portal has been built. We can use it to enter the Void Empire at any time. Our plan has taken a crucial step." Qin turned his head and looked at the crowd. His tone was a little emotional and complicated. They had been waiting for this day for far too long. Luzi nodded and said to Qin, "We are already prepared. We can set off at any time." "Qin, those who are not prepared will not come here." Zhou Lin smiled at Qin and said, "I can't wait to see the scenery of the Void Empire." Chang Tian nodded in agreement and said to Qin, "Zhou Lin is right. If we weren't prepared, we wouldn't have come here." Bai didn't say anything, but her determined gaze told Qin that she could enter the battle at any time. As for the Holy Emperor and Demon Emperor, the two of them had cold expressions. Although they didn't say anything, they didn't raise any questions. It was basically a tacit agreement. Seeing this, Qin smiled and said to everyone, "Since that's the case, let's open the portal now." Qin turned around and looked at the portal. At the same time, the portal suddenly lit up with a dazzling purple light and emitted an ancient and desolate aura. Upon seeing this scene, everyone revealed looks of anticipation. However, Qin was stunned at this moment. Baiyu, who had been paying attention to Qin, saw the stunned expression on Qin's face and asked curiously, "Qin, what's wrong?" Qin came back to his senses when he heard Baiyu's words. His expression gradually became serious, and he said in a deep voice, "I haven't even poured energy into the portal, and it's already operating on its own." Everyone else was stunned when they heard Qin's answer. Qin hasn't poured energy into the portal? Then who's opening the portal? While everyone was stunned, the portal opened completely. At the same time, a charming figure slowly appeared in the air above the portal. It was the Insect Queen that Qin had met not too long ago. Qin frowned slightly when he saw the Insect Queen suddenly appear, and he asked, "What's the meaning of this?" The Insect Queen laughed coldly. "What's the meaning of this? Since you're unwilling to accept me into your team, then I'll act on my own." As she spoke, she looked at the Holy Emperor and said coldly, "Bai Xing, do you have any objections?" The Holy Emperor didn't say anything when he heard the Insect Queen's question, nor did he make any expression. It seemed like he didn't want to communicate with the Insect Queen. The insect queen was a little angry when she saw this. Just as she was about to speak, an arm slowly reached out from the portal and grabbed at the insect queen. Everyone on the ground was shocked when they saw this scene. The insect queen also realized that she was in danger. Just as she was about to dodge, the arm that reached out from the portal was already behind her and grabbed her by the neck. Almost at the same time, a tall figure dressed in black robes and wearing a bronze mask appeared behind the insect queen. He looked very ordinary, but he made people feel a sense of reverence, as if they were facing an abyss. The insect queen was grabbed by the neck, and she couldn't move as if she had been immobilized. She shouted angrily at the person behind her. "Who are you? What do you want?" This was not only the insect queen's question, but also the question in everyone's mind. Who was this person who had suddenly appeared? Qin Chuan stared at the figure in the bronze mask, and he already had an answer in his heart. "Are you asking me?" A cold voice came from behind the bronze mask. His eyes looked at the insect queen through the bronze mask, and there was no trace of emotion in them. "You." Just as the insect queen was about to speak, Atheus's shout came from below. Atheus stared at the bronze mask. Although he had only seen this figure once, he would never forget it for the rest of his life. When everyone heard Atheus's shout, their faces were filled with shock. "You, this man in black robes and a bronze mask was you? Why did he suddenly appear here?" Countless questions surfaced in everyone's minds, but at this time, no one could answer the questions in their hearts. The most shocked person was the insect queen. She didn't expect you to suddenly appear at this time. She was completely unprepared, and even if she was prepared, she might not be able to escape from Yu's hands. At this moment, the insect queen seemed to have foreseen her end. Chapter 1440. You didn't show any surprise when Azuth revealed his identity. He glanced at Azuth and said, "So, it's you. I really didn't expect that after so many years, I would still be able to see an old friend of mine as soon as I return. You seem to be very emotional. After so many changes, the universe was no longer the same. There were not many people he was familiar with who were still alive." Yu's words were equivalent to admitting his identity. This caused everyone to feel extremely shocked. They had just finished building the teleportation channel, and you had already appeared in front of them through the channel. Didn't this mean that you had been waiting for this moment for a long time? Right when everyone was shocked, the Saint Emperor took a step forward and said in a low voice, "Let her go." Hearing Saint Emperor's words, you looked at him and said, "You want to save her? Why don't you do it yourself?" Without any hesitation, the Heavenly Emperor launched an attack at you. With a wave of his hand, a stream of Xianhuang qi shot towards you like a bolt of lightning. Facing the Saint Emperor's attack, you had no intention of dodging. He actually pulled the insect queen in front of him, intending to use the insect queen to help him block the attack. Seeing this, the Saint Emperor immediately turned graceful grace into nothingness, his face filled with anger. "You're backing down just like that?" You looked at Saint Emperor and said, "If that's the case, why don't you back down first?" "After I'm done with my business." Before you could finish a sentence, a golden figure suddenly appeared behind him. At the same time, several flowers grew out from his body. They were beautiful and charming. "Kill!" Zhou Lin shouted. The golden blade in her hand pierced towards Yu's back. It was also at this time that Meng Manji began to release a dreamy light to bewitch Yu's mind. When Yu's mind was bewitched by the dreamy light, Zhou Lin's blade had already pierced into Yu's body. However, what made Zhou Lin feel strange was that she did not feel any physical contact. It was as if she had stabbed into a ball of air. How interesting. An inheritor of the Mirage Dragon and an incarnation of the Gold Law. How surprising. Yu's voice suddenly rang in Zhou Lin's ears. She didn't know when, but Yu's figure had appeared behind Zhou Lin. Zhou Lin had no idea how all of this happened. Yu raised his left hand, extended a finger, and lightly tapped Zhou Lin's back. Immediately, an extremely terrifying force crashed into Zhou Lin's body with a loud bang, sending her flying. She turned into a ray of light and disappeared into the horizon. At the same time, a pressure that caused everyone present to feel horrified descended, and actually cause their entire bodies to ache and be unable to move. Could it be that he has already become a god of creation? Chang Tian's heart was filled with fear. Ever since he became Chang Tian, this was the first time he had faced such a terrifying situation. It was the first time he felt the shadow of death looming over him. The demon emperor gritted his teeth. Only after becoming a god of creation would he be able to unleash this kind of power. At this moment, the demon emperor didn't know if he was angry or regretful. He was unwilling to die in Yu's hands. The holy emperor stared intently at the insect queen that was still in Yu's hands. As long as the insect queen was fine, he could endure any pain. All right, the game should end here. Next, it's time to get down to business. As he spoke, Yu's figure slowly descended from the sky and arrived in front of Qin Chuan. He looked at Qin Chuan and carefully sized up Qin Chuan as if he didn't want to miss any details. Qin Chuan, so you're Qin Chuan. Yu sighed, and for the first time, his emotions fluctuated slightly. In the face of Yu, Qin Chuan tried his best to resist the pressure that was pressing down on him. However, all he could do was stand. He couldn't even take a single step. Why aren't you saying anything? Didn't you organize these people to find me and kill me? Now that I'm standing right in front of you, aren't you going to say anything? You looked at Qin Chuan as if he was asking a serious question, but at the same time, it also seemed like he was mocking Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan still didn't say anything. It wasn't that he couldn't speak, but he didn't want to. In this situation, saying anything would be meaningless. Bang! He raised his hand and sent the insect queen flying. Then he stretched out his hands and pressed down on Qin Chuan's shoulders. At this moment, Qin Chuan's chest suddenly lit up with a bright light. However, just as the light was about to shoot out, it instantly dimmed down. The 9 transformations of the Dragon Pearl, the secret of the Dragon Clan. It's been too many years since I've seen it. Now that I've seen it, I really miss it. He sighed as he recalled the ancient times when he and the ancestral Gragon fought together. It really made people sigh. Just as he was sighing in his heart, Qin Chuan seemed to have noticed something and said in a deep voice, "You're not you. You're a clone." When everyone heard Qin Chuan's words, they were all shocked. The one they were facing was actually just a clone of you? Then how strong would the real you be? You chuckled and said, "That's right. I'm indeed just a clone. However, it's enough to deal with you guys." While speaking, you grabbed Qin Chuan's shoulders and pulled Qin Chuan towards the teleportation channel. Seeing this scene, Lu Zi exclaimed, "What are you doing?" You glanced at Lu Zi and said, "Of course, I'm taking him away from here. Don't even think about it." Above LVZ's head, the purple star divine eye appeared. Just as she was about to borrow the power of the purple star divine eye to attack you, you raised his hand and flicked the purple star divine eye through the air. The purple star divine eye was sent flying. At the same time, LVZ cried out in pain. At this moment, the spiritual connection between her and the purple star divine eye became extremely weak. It was as if the slightest struggle would break it. "Don't hurt them." At this moment, all Qin Chuan could do was to say these words for everyone. In reality, there was nothing he could do. "All right, I'll listen to you. We'll let them go for now. You seem to be in a good mood." Only when he was talking to Qin Chuan would his mood change. At this moment, Qin Chuan and Yu's figures were getting closer and closer to the teleportation channel. However, everyone could only watch as Yu took Qin Chuan away. There was nothing they could do. When Qin Chuan and Yu's figures entered the teleportation channel and disappeared, the pressure that enveloped everyone gradually dissipated. Everyone regained their freedom. However, nobody dared to do anything. Everyone's hearts were empty. Not only because Qin Chuan was captured alive by Yu, but also because they as supreme existences were so weak and powerless in front of you. Chapter 1441. I'm going to save him. Lu Zi's voice suddenly resounded in everyone's ears. Her gaze was extremely resolute as she looked up at the gloomy portal above them. She was going to save Qin Chuan, even if she had to risk her life. Save him? How are you going to save him? The Demon King grunted coldly. Everyone has seen how strong Yu is. You're going to save him now? You might as well say that you're going to throw your life away. The Demon King's words made a lot of sense. Based on the strength that you had displayed just now, it was no different from throwing an egg against a rock if they wanted to fight you. The Holy Emperor wasn't in the mood to discuss this right now. He flew swiftly towards the direction that the insect queen had been blasted away in order to search for traces of it. On the other side, Baiyu had already summoned Zhou Lin back. Zhou Lin hadn't suffered any serious injuries, but she seemed to have suffered a huge mental blow. It didn't take long for the Holy Emperor to bring the insect queen back. The insect queen was in the Holy Emperor's arms, and her hands were tightly clutching onto the Holy Emperor's clothes. They'd only seen true love after suffering such a calamity. Even though they hadn't died in that battle, all of them were in an extremely low mood. They were still in high spirits and wanted to take the initiative to search for you. But now that they looked at the situation, it was simply a joke. We can't just let it go like this. Chang Tian gritted his teeth. We'll die sooner or later if we can't deal with you. Haven't you given up? Are you joking? The Demon King frowned. We're no match for you. Chang Tian spoke solemnly. Then are we just going to wait for death here? Or should we hide in the dark universe and be cowards for the rest of our lives? The Holy Emperor pursed his lips and said, if he becomes a god of creation and wants to kill us, then we won't be able to do anything even if we hide in the dark universe. The Demon King was extremely irritated when he heard this. Doesn't that mean that we'll definitely die? Right at this moment, Zhou Lin suddenly spoke. No, we've all been deceived. Yu isn't that strong. If Yu is really that strong, then there's no reason why he didn't kill us just now. Upon hearing Zhou Lin's words, the Devil Emperor snorted coldly and said, if he wanted to kill us just now, he only needed to raise his hand. He was just too lazy to kill us. You're wrong. Lu Zi finally reacted. She said to everyone, I'm guessing you must have used some kind of method to create such a strong doppelganger. This doppelganger must have many restrictions. It's not that he didn't want to kill us. It's that he couldn't kill us. When the Demon Emperor heard Lu Zi's words, he frowned and said, is your brain damaged? If he wanted to kill us just now, would you have been able to resist? Although the Devil Emperor's words were unpleasant to hear, everyone felt that it was reasonable. They were suppressed by you earlier. If you wanted to kill them, it would be a very simple matter. There was no reason for him to let them go. Hearing this, Zhou Lin said to the crowd, I know you may not believe me, but I have facts to back up my words. As someone who was personally attacked by you, I can tell you very clearly that Yu's strength is only on the surface. To put it simply, his pressure is incomparably terrifying, but his true strength is not strong enough to kill us. Hearing Zhou Lin's words, the Saint Emperor frowned and asked the Insect Queen in his arms, at that time, how did you feel? The Insect Queen tried to recall what had happened before replying, when I was sent flying, I thought I was going to die. However, that power didn't seem to be strong enough to insta-kill me. It only left me with some light injuries. When everyone heard the Insect Queen's reply, they all lowered their heads and pondered. According to Zhou Lin and the Insect Queen's words, Yu was just a paper tiger. Although he looked strong, his lethality was limited. Now that they thought about Yu's performance, the more they thought about it, the more they felt that this was very likely. Zhou Lin added, moreover, you only sent us flying. His goal should be to make us leave this place temporarily, so that you wouldn't notice that our injuries were not serious. At this time, Lu Zi had already summoned back the Purple Star Divine Eyes, and the mental connection between her and the Purple Star Divine Eyes had already been restored. It seemed like the feeling from before was just an illusion. Faced with all this evidence, the Demon Emperor also came to his senses, and he said with some surprise, so the only thing that was powerful about Yu's doppelganger was his pressure. That's right, it was only his pressure that was powerful. Lu Zi gritted her teeth and said, moreover, isn't it suspicious that he captured Qinchuan? Chang Tian's expression changed abruptly upon hearing LVZ's words, and he exclaimed in surprise, so, he hasn't become a god of creation yet. The reason he sent this clone here is to deter us, and make us not dare to act rashly in order to buy enough time for him to become a god of creation. As for capturing Qin Chuan, it's definitely a crucial part of his plan to become a god of creation. Atheist also chimed in at this time. I understand you quite well. If you really had the ability to kill us, he definitely wouldn't have let us go. So, he must have been bluffing before, and because of our fear and apprehension toward him, we weren't able to see through his ploy immediately. We have to save Qin Chuan. Bai Yu, who had been silent this entire time, expressed her resolute attitude at this moment. No matter what, she had to save Qin Chuan. Chang Tian turned to the Demon Emperor, Holy Emperor, and Insect Queen. What about you? Faced with Chang Tian's question, the Demon Emperor hesitated before gritting his teeth and saying, I'm not doing this to save Qin Chuan. I'm doing this to save myself. If you didn't die, then all of them would die. Since that was the case, they might as well take a gamble while there was still hope. The Holy Emperor also expressed his stance at this moment. Let's go together. Insect Queen said, let me join your alliance. We'll go save him together. Screech. Suddenly, a loud cry sounded from afar. Everyone subconsciously looked in the direction of the cry, and they saw a fiery red phoenix flying over from afar. It was covered in colorful light, and it was dignified and beautiful. Seeing this fiery red phoenix, Atheist was extremely shocked. Is this the divine phoenix? In ancient times, Atheist had read some records about the primordial divine phoenix, but he had never seen a real divine phoenix. He had thought that the divine phoenix had disappeared in the long river of history. Who would have thought that he would be lucky enough to see the legendary divine phoenix today? Just as everyone was shocked by the sudden appearance of the divine phoenix, the divine phoenix suddenly transformed into a figure that Lu Zi and the others were extremely familiar with. Enchanting. Chapter 1442. Seeing the sudden appearance of Yaorao, Lu Zi was stunned. She looked at Yaorao and said in shock, How did you... That incomparably powerful aura on Yaorao's body was clearly the aura that only a peak existence could possess. She clearly remembered that when she and Zhou Lin had left the city of Starting Point, Yaorao was merely at the mid-unity stage. Now, only a few months had passed, and Yaorao had unexpectedly advanced to the peak perfection stage. This kind of advancement speed was a bit too terrifying. Yaorao faintly smiled and said to Lu Zi, Speaking of this matter, I am also very surprised. I was tempering myself in Millstone Continent, and after crossing the immortal tribulation, a mutation appeared in my body, and I became like this. It seems I'm also a peak existence. Hearing Yaorao's words, everyone was stunned for a moment. This was the first time they had heard that someone immediately became a peak existence after crossing the immortal tribulation. However, Atheist was not surprised by this. He looked at Yaorao and said with a sigh, Divine Phoenix is not a true god that ordinary people can compare with. You being able to directly become a peak existence after advancing to crossing Tribulation Realm should be related to you being the only Divine Phoenix in the universe. Hearing Atheist's words, everyone was somewhat curious. Zhou Lin even asked, What do you mean? Atheist explained to everyone. In ancient times, as one of the gods, Divine Phoenix controlled the undying and indestructible nirvana power. Later, Divine Phoenix fell, and this undying and indestructible nirvana power never appeared again. Now, a new Divine Phoenix has appeared, and this undying and indestructible nirvana power reappeared, directly sending her to the altar. Hearing Atheist's words, Heaven was somewhat puzzled and asked, Since Divine Phoenix is undying and indestructible, then how did Divine Phoenix fall in ancient times? Without waiting for Atheist to speak, Yaorao explained, Divine Phoenix is undying and indestructible, but during Nirvana, it is the most dangerous time for Divine Phoenix. If they are attacked during Nirvana, then even Divine Phoenix will have the danger of falling. Hearing Yaorao's explanation, everyone's face revealed understanding color. Hearing this, the matter was much more reasonable. By the way, how did you come here? Zhou Lin was a little curious. Not many people seemed to know that they were here. Hearing Yishiwen, Yaorao explained, before I was just passing by Io Star Cloud and was preparing to return to starting point, then I sensed an extremely strong aura appearing here, so I wanted to come over to take a look at the situation. Then I met you all. While speaking, Yaorao looked all around and asked, "Is Qinchuan not with you?" Hearing Yaorao mention Qinchuan, the expression on everyone's face became extremely complicated. Lu Zi pursed her lips, then said to Yaorao, "Qinchuan was captured by you. We are preparing to rescue him." Hearing Lu Zi, Yaorao was greatly surprised. She had never thought that Qinchuan was actually captured by you. So to speak, that extremely astonishing aura of before ought to belong to you. I'll go with you. Without thinking, Yaorao wanted to go with everyone to rescue Qinchuan. And regarding Yaorao's participation, everyone naturally didn't have any objection. Lu Zi raised her head and looked towards the transmission channel in the sky, then said to everyone, "Let's go." Hearing Yaorao, everyone simultaneously set out and flew towards that transmission channel, then entered the transmission channel one by one and disappeared in a blink of an eye. Dark Universe, Void Empire. When Lu Zi opened her eyes, she saw an extremely illusory world. The clouds and mist in front of her, the ground under her feet, everything appeared extremely illusory. Seeing these, Lu Zi couldn't help but feel as if she was in an illusion. But after seeing other people around her, she knew that she was not in an illusion, rather in Dark Universe, in Void Empire. Is this Dark Universe? What a peculiar environment. Zhou Lin looked all around and discovered that the ground under their feet was dark purple, and the clouds and mist in the surroundings were also dark purple. Regardless of light or other things, everything was related to purple and was full of illusory aura. This feeling is completely different from my illusion law. Lu Zi's illusion law was also dark purple in color. Merely compared to the dark purple in the environment before their eyes, it was two completely different kinds of dark purple. One kind was dreamlike dark purple, and the other kind was illusory dark purple. This is the omnipresent power of the void that fills the dark universe. Atheist said to everyone, "The place where we are now seems extremely peculiar, but actually this is only an environment that commonly exists in Dark Universe, nothing more. Only because you have never come into contact with this kind of environment before, so you feel it is novel." Hearing Atheist, Heaven asked, "Where should we go now?" Facing Heaven's question, Atheist shook his head and said, "I don't know." Although Atheist had some understanding of Void Empire, but this was the first time he had come to Void Empire. "You don't know?" Everyone was taken aback by Atheist's answer. This was the first time they had come to Void Empire, and without knowing the way, how are they going to find the Imperial City in the vast sea of people? Originally, I wanted Galaska to lead the way, but that guy has never seen Void Empire since he was born, so he doesn't know the way at all. So if we want to find the Imperial City of Void Empire, we will have to ask around ourselves. Atheist glanced at everyone and said helplessly. Lu Zi suggested, "Let's just grab a random person from Void Empire and ask." "I will go." Zhou Lin took the initiative to step forward and wanted to grab a person from Void Empire, but unexpectedly, she was stopped by Baiyu. Baiyu pulled Zhou Lin's arm and said to everyone, "Everyone, don't forget what Qin Xuan said before. After we enter Void Empire, we are forbidden to act alone. I think even if we want to catch someone, we should do it together." Although Qin Xuan wasn't present, Baiyu still remembered Qin Xuan's words clearly. Hearing Baiyu's words, everyone nodded lightly in agreement. Baiyu was right. In a situation where they were unfamiliar with the place, it was better for them not to act alone. Although they were all powerful existences, there was nothing wrong with being careful. Soon, everyone found the natives of this planet and asked for the way to the Void Empire's Imperial City. From here, they headed east in a straight line. With their speed, they would reach the Void Empire's Imperial City in 3 days. At this time, the person who captured Qin Xuan had already brought Qin Xuan back to the Void Empire's Imperial City through a special transmission method. Chapter 1443. The Void Empire's Imperial City. Yu's doppelganger slowly descended from the sky and stood in front of a palace. He stepped forward and pushed open the palace doors, grabbed Qin and walked in with him. After they entered, the palace doors automatically closed. At the same time, Yu's doppelganger, who was holding Qin suddenly disappeared. After Yu's doppelganger disappeared, Qin regained his freedom. He did not escape immediately because he knew in his heart that he could not escape. Qin looked around and found that this was a very spacious palace. In the palace, other than the towering stone pillars and the smooth floor, there were no other decorations. There was not even a chair. Tap, tap, tap. Just as Qin was looking around the palace, a figure slowly walked out from the darkness. He was wearing a black robe and a bronze mask. He was tall and had an extraordinary aura. He looked exactly like Yu's doppelganger that had captured Qin. However, Qin knew that this was not Yu's doppelganger, but Yu's real body. Qin looked at Yu and asked, "You captured me. Why didn't you just kill me?" Hearing Qin's question, Yu asked back, "Why would I kill you?" Qin frowned slightly when he heard this, and he said, "Just like you, I've grasped the laws of time, the laws of space, and even the laws of void. Didn't you capture me to kill me, obtain all the energy within these laws, and become a god of creation?" Hearing that, Yu smiled lightly and said, "What you said should be your own guess, as well as other people's opinions." Qin looked at Yu with some confusion. Could it be that you captured him and brought him here for some other purpose? What are you trying to do? Qin did not want to beat around the bush with you. He directly asked his question. He wanted to know what Yu's goal was. Hearing Qin's question, Yu did not answer immediately. Instead, he asked again, "What kind of person do you think I am?" Hearing Yu's question, Qin felt that it was very strange. At this moment, Yu was completely different from the Yu he had imagined. He did not seem like a high and mighty god. Instead, he seemed more like a big brother next door. However, when he thought of Yu's incomparably domineering behavior when facing others not long ago, Qin suddenly realized that Yu would only show this special side of him when facing him. Thinking of this, Qin looked deeply at Yu and said, "Before I met you, I thought that you were a proud, conceited, capable, ambitious person. After meeting you, I am even more sure of my judgment of you. But now, I feel that my understanding of you is still not enough." Hearing Qin's answer, Yu clapped his hands and said, "A very pertinent answer. In fact, in many people's eyes, I am a proud and conceited person. I am capable, ambitious, and, at the same time, extremely cruel. You have to know that in the past, I could casually annihilate hundreds of billions of elites from a human race and the demon race. No matter where I go, this kind of deed is enough to give me the title of a tyrant." Hearing Yu's words, Qin pursed his lips and asked, "So, at that time, you really wanted to pursue more power. That's why you annihilated hundreds of billions of elites." Hearing this, Yu smiled faintly and said, "If it wasn't for me, the human race and the demon race would just be two small, unknown races in the bright universe. They would probably never be able to see what the world outside the silver ring is like. I gave them everything, and then I took everything back. Isn't this the natural thing to do? But they are your people. They are living beings." Qin's eyes were filled with hatred as he stared at Yu. It was as if he wasn't facing a person, but an emotionless beast. "You seem to hate me." Yu looked at Qin. His tone was a little strange. "You shouldn't hate me. Why can't I hate you?" Qin gritted his teeth and said, "I really want to tear you apart right now." Hearing Qin's words, Yu slowly raised his hand and placed it on the bronze mask on his face. He took off the bronze mask, pointed at his own face, and asked Qin, "Now, do you still want to tear me apart?" Qin looked at Yu's face. His face was filled with disbelief and shock. This was a face that Qin felt very familiar. It was so familiar that he could see it every day, touch it, and understand every detail, because that face was exactly the same as his face. "How can it be?" Qin stared at Yu. "Who are you?" Yu smiled and answered, "I am Yu, human emperor Yu." Hearing Yu's answer, Qin pointed at his own face and asked hysterically, "Then what about me? Who am I?" You looked at Qin Chuan with deep meaning and said, "You are me, you, Qin Chuan, and also human emperor. Our identities are the same." This is impossible. Qin Chuan couldn't accept this matter. With Yu's realm, he could have countless of ways to change his appearance. He definitely wouldn't believe every word that you said. Is it hard to accept? You looked at Qin Chuan, sighed, and said, "No matter who it is, when they know that they are another person's incarnation, they would feel extremely shocked and find it hard to accept this kind of reality." Qin Chuan shook his head and said firmly, "I won't believe you. You can't lie to me." Seeing Qin Chuan shaking his head, you smiled and said, "It's okay if you don't believe me, but what about the rune sword? The rune sword that accompanied you from nothing to something, from a mere body refinement stage to today's existence. You don't believe it?" While talking, you reached out his hand to Qin Chuan, and a golden blade flew out from Qin Chuan's body and fell into Yu's hand. Seeing this scene, Qin Chuan was completely shocked, speechless. You lowered his head to look at the rune sword and gently stroked the body of the rune sword, as if he was facing an old friend that he hadn't seen for many years. He sighed and said to Qin Chuan, "All these years, I have been waiting for this day, waiting for you to appear in front of me, waiting for the rune sword to return to my hand. Today, I have finally waited for this day." Qin Chuan stood there, stupefied. He heard every word that you said, but it was as if he didn't hear anything. At this moment, his mind flashed through the experience of these years. Could it be that all of this was just an illusion? Looking at Qin Chuan's dazed look, Yu's eyes flashed with a touch of pity. He sat cross-legged on the ground, patted the seat beside him, and said to Qin Chuan, "Sit down, let's talk slowly. I can tell you everything that happened before and solve all the doubts in your heart." Chapter 1444. Qin Chuan didn't walk to Yu's side and sit down. He sat down slowly on the spot without saying a word. He was silent, like a walking corpse. Seeing Qin Chuan sit down, Yu began his narration. As he reminisced, he spoke to Qin Chuan. "That was something that happened a long, long time ago. Now that I'm reminiscing about it, it's as if it happened yesterday. That was the first time I came to the Dark Universe. I came into contact with the Void Empire. My original plan was to understand the power of the Void Empire. Then, I would help the Void Empire take back what was rightfully theirs. But in the process of learning more about the Void Empire, I learned about the existence of the Creator God spirits." As he spoke, he gently waved his hand, and a huge stone tablet suddenly appeared in the middle of the spacious hall. This stone tablet looked extremely simple, and it was full of cracks left behind by the passage of time. A desolate aura came from it. Qin Chuan turned his head and looked at the stone tablet. He looked at the unfamiliar words carved on the stone tablet, but he couldn't make out what was written on the stone tablet. You saw Qin Chuan's confusion, so he explained to Qin Chuan. "The words on the stone tablet come from the Rune continent. It is a rune used to record history. You have not learned it before, so it is normal that you do not recognize it. The runes on the stone tablet praise the life of the Creator God spirits. It says that when time, space, and void powers combine again, the Creator God spirits will reappear." Hearing Yu's words, Qin Chuan took a deep look at the stone tablet. His tone was extremely complicated as he said, "Is it because you saw this stone tablet and the records on it that you did those things that angered both men and gods?" When you heard that, he laughed and said, "Do you think it is cruel for mortals to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the Creator God spirits? But I think it's an honor for them. Sacrificing their lives for the Creator God spirits is an honor. It is your honor, not theirs." Qin Chuan looked at you with a gloomy look. No matter what, he could not accept Yu's philosophy. You glanced at Qin Chuan with a subtle gaze and said, "You may not be able to accept my philosophy now, but after you finish listening to my story, perhaps you will understand why." At this point, you continued his narration and slowly said, "When I first saw the records on the stone tablet, I thought it was just a fake myth. However, some things that happened after that gradually changed my mind. This is because the God of creation stage divine beings have truly existed, and they're not fake divine beings that have been fabricated by later generations. If you want to talk about who are the fake gods, then it should be us, the so-called ultimate existences. We are the fake gods. During that period of time, I almost traveled all over the Void Empire and saw the Creator God spirits left behind one after another in the Void Empire. That great power made me yearn for it. You wave his hand, and scrolls of paintings appeared in front of Chuan. These scrolls recorded the magnificent landscape. Even though he was just looking at the scrolls, Chuan felt like he was there. He was deeply shocked by the beautiful scenery in front of him. Do you see the dazzling aurora? That is the only place in the dark universe that has 5 colors. That is where the Creator God spirits once walked. Every 1,000 years, the back of the Creator God spirits will appear in this aurora. At that time, countless people will go to worship them. I was very lucky. I happened to go there 1,000 years ago and saw the back of the Creator God spirits. It was indescribable. After that, I often looked at the back of the Creator God spirits. It was as if I could see myself in it. Look at that sea of stars. The crack in the middle is the mark left behind by the God of creation. As long as you walk into that sea of stars, everyone will be able to vaguely hear the words left behind by the God of creation. According to the local records passed down, the God of creation's words should be splitting the sea. In these scrolls, all the traces were left behind by the Creator God spirits. Only such a great existence can change the universe and make their traces not disappear after countless years. Chuan, if you were to see these shocking scenes, what would you think? Don't you want to become a great existence like the Creator God spirits? You looked at Chuan with burning eyes, waiting for Chuan's answer. Chuan looked at you deeply, sighed, and said, "Of course I want to become a great existence like the Creator God spirits. But I would never be willing to build my greatness on the pain of innocent people." Hearing Chuan's answer, you laughed and said, "Actually, I knew you would answer me like this." Chuan looked at you and said, "Don't say it like you know me very well." You did not respond to Chuan. He continued to tell the story and said to Chuan, "When I gradually learned more about the Creator God spirits, I was completely convinced by the power of the Creator God spirits. I longed to become such a person, to obtain the Creator God's power. I controlled the law of time, the ancestral Gragon controlled the law of space, and the law of the void was controlled by the arcane spirit Kasisna and Zadier. Some of these people were my brothers and friends, and some are my enemies. As long as I merged their power into my body, I would be able to obtain the Creator God's power. At that time, I really felt that I was the chosen one. The conditions to obtain the Creator God's power were gathered around me. Wasn't this a hint from the unseen? I was tempted, very tempted. At that time, I felt that I was only one step away from becoming a Creator God. As long as I took this step, I would be able to obtain everything that I had always dreamed of. But at the same time, I also hesitated because if I really took this step, then the people who would die would not only be my enemies, but also my brothers and friends. I was in great pain, and I was very conflicted. On one hand, I longed to obtain the Creator God's power and to become a true God. On the other hand, I was conflicted about my brotherhood and friendship. During that time, there were 2 different voices arguing and arguing in my mind every day. I almost became a lunatic. When I could no longer tolerate these arguments, I made an extremely difficult decision, and that was to cut off one of the voices in my mind. When I really put this matter into action, my mind finally quieted down, and the voice that was left behind desired to become a Creator God. Hearing Yu's words, Chuan could almost guess that the voice that was cut off was him. Chapter 1445. At this point, Yu once again looked at Chuan and sighed. The voice that was left behind desired to become a god of creation, so I called it divinity. As for the voice that was cut off by me, he wanted to protect my brothers and friends. He did not want to harm others, so I called it humanity. Humanity. When he heard Yu's words, Chuan could not help but feel a little absent-minded. He could not help but think of the words that the heavens said when they helped him become a god of creation. The reason why the heavens were willing to help him become a god of creation was because they valued his humanity. In the eyes of the heavens, he was different from the others. After the others gained great power, they desired to become a god in the eyes of others. However, he was different. From the beginning to the end, he was dominated by his humanity. He was a person who had great power, but never wanted to become a god. At that time, Qin thought that it was because of his personality. Now, it seemed that the reason why he did not want to become a god was because he did not possess divinity. His divinity was you. So that's how it is. Qin muttered in a low voice. There were many doubts that he did not understand. At this moment, all of them were explained. It was not that he did not want to become a god, but from the beginning to the end, he did not possess divinity. You looked at Qin, who was in a daze, and continued. After I cut you off, a series of things happened. You should already know about those things, so I don't need to say more. Hearing Yu's words, Qin asked, So, how did I go to the banished land? How did I become someone else's son? Everything was arranged by fate, Yu replied. Yu replied, Back then, after I killed you, I used the runic sword to seal you. For a very long time, I didn't pay any attention to you. Until one day, when I discovered something else and thought of you, I discovered that you and the runic sword had disappeared without a trace. At this point, Yu lowered his head to look at the rune sword in his hand and said, I don't know who took who away back then, but that's not important. Now that both of you have returned to my side, that's enough. Qin looked at the rune sword in his hand and asked with a complicated tone, So, the rune sword never belonged to me, right? All along, the rune sword had been Qin's greatest reliance. However, he had never thought that this reliance could be taken away by others at any time. Yu nodded and said, Indeed, the runic sword has never belonged to you. Moreover, it has never belonged to me. It has always been independent. It has always coexisted with you and me, as if we were partners. Qin asked, If that's the case, why did the runic sword leave me and come to your hand with just a wave of your hand? It's probably because he's meeting an old friend he hasn't seen in a long time. That's why he's so excited. You gave an unreasonable explanation. Obviously, he did not want to say too much about this matter. I have another question. Qin pursed his lips and asked, If one day you really become a god of creation, what will you do? After hearing Qin's question, Yu pondered for a moment and replied, To be honest, I've always been working hard in the direction of becoming a god of creation. Before becoming a god of creation, I've never thought about this question. However, there are only two possibilities. At this point, Yu paused for a moment, then suddenly smiled and said, Either destroy the world or resurrect those who have died one by one. Great evil or great good, it all depends on a single thought. This is the power of the Creator. After hearing Yu's answer, Qin asked again, Answer me another question. Is there any connection between me and you becoming a god of creation? In the past, I also believed that as long as I still had my divinity, I would definitely be able to become a god of creation. My human nature wasn't important and was dispensable. However, I later discovered that things weren't as simple as I thought. As my human nature, you share my talent, my destiny, and even my power. As a divinity, I wasn't a complete individual. Even if I fused with the god of creation's power, I wouldn't be able to take the final step and become a true god of creation. Thus, I needed you. You took a deep look at Qin. He did not expect things to develop to this point. After hearing Yu's explanation, Qin fell silent. After a long time, he asked Yu, So, are you going to kill me or eat me? Yu shook his head and replied, No, it's fusion. As a divinity, I will fuse with you as a human. Everything that we are will be complete. At that time, you and I will be the gods of creation, and we will control everything. After hearing this answer, which was not unexpected, Qin asked again, Then, at that time, will the one in charge be me or you? Or perhaps a brand new god of creation will be born? I don't know. Maybe I'll be the one in charge, or maybe it'll be you. There's a bigger possibility that we'll become a brand new you and I. However, no matter who it is, we'll all be gods of creation. Yu smiled. He did not seem to care about things like being in charge. Is it worth it? Qin Chuan really could not understand you. In order to become a god of creation, he would rather lose his own personality and become a different version of himself. Was such a sacrifice really worth it? In the face of Qin Chuan's question, you nodded seriously and replied, "It's worth it. Everything is worth it." In order to take this final step, you had waited for more than 10 million years. He had waited for too long. No matter what the outcome was, he had to take this final step and fulfill his long-cherished wish. Qin Chuan knew that he could not stop you. At the same time, he could not fight back. The only thing he could do was to stay true to his heart and stick to his principles. No matter what the outcome was, he would not regret it. Now, you know everything. Is there anything else you want to ask or say? You looked at Qin Chuan. He was like a god who was about to judge the mortal world, high and mighty. Hearing Yu's words, Qin Chuan said in a low voice, "Great evil or great good. If you have the choice, I hope you could be a great good person. After all, after the destruction of the world, you'll be the only one left. It'll be too lonely, won't it?" Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Yu shook his head and said, "This choice is not for me to make. After the fusion, you and I will be the ones who will make this decision. So, whether it's great evil or great good, it's up to you." Chapter 1446. At this moment, Qin Chuan thought of a lot of things. He thought of the ancestral Gragon. At that time, the ancestral Gragon once said, "The human race and the demon race are lucky to have you." He thought the ancestral Gragon was talking to him, but now it seems that the ancestral Gragon was talking to him, the human nature of you. Because of the existence of Yu's human nature, the ancestral Gragon saw a glimmer of hope to defeat you, but unfortunately, this glimmer of hope was now shattered. He had grown to a very, very powerful level, but compared to you, it was still not worth mentioning. He had not practiced the last transformation of the 9 transformations of the Dragon Ball, so he did not know how powerful the last transformation was. He had become a supreme existence in the domain of the Thunder Law, but in the domain of the Space Law and the Time Law, he was still too far away. There was still a lot of room for improvement. Those like-minded companions, he did not know what the situation was now. Maybe they had given up the plan to attack the Void Empire. Maybe they were still thinking about how to rescue him. The starting point was full of vitality and vitality. The new home of the human race and the demon race, the first step of the rise. He did not know how long it would last, how many more steps it could take. He hoped that after him, there would be someone who could continue to protect the starting point, protect the human race and the demon race. Even if this protection could only last for a short time, it was enough. The hope that so many people had placed on him, in the end, was going to be disappointed. "I'm really sorry. I'm still going to lose." Qin Chuan was very regretful, and also very helpless as a living person when he learned that his life did not belong to him. But to his enemy, his heart was really broken. It turned out that what he had been working hard to achieve was a complete joke. Thinking back to how he felt when he found out about the infuriating and cruel things that the Imperial Academy had done, he felt both funny and pitiful. Funny because he never knew that the person who had done those things was himself. Pitiful because he never knew that the person who had done those things was himself. There were many things in the past he could not make a choice, and there were many things in the future he still could not make a choice. This was his sorrow, and also the sorrow of this era. At this moment, some of the things that he had experienced in the past few decades once again appeared in Qin Chuan's mind. His childhood sweetheart Wang Wenxue, the aggressive Lu Cheng, the strong and gentle senior sister Zhou Lin, Lu Zi who never left, the heart-throbbing Yao Rao, the warm-hearted Chen Changxing, Bai and Long Xiao who had an everlasting friendship, Ningya, the teacher for life, Ningya, the valiant Aunt Qinju. All of these were the precious treasures in his life, the people he would often think of, and all of them, in the near future, will no longer belong to him. Just the thought of this made Qin Chuan's heart ache. This you of the world of the world of the world of the world. Of the world of the gods, you as Yu's God, and you as God. The existence be it God or God, was you as you. Of you, and you to him, bees to the world of. We are about to begin. He slowly stood up and walked to Chinchuan's side. He raised the runic sword in his hand and, little by little, gently pierced it into Chinchuan's body. Yu's movements were very slow and gentle, but they were incomparably firm and resolute. At this moment, Chinchuan finally understood the feelings of those who had died under the runic sword. The taste of pain and despair spread like a poison, gradually spreading throughout his body. From his body to his soul, everything was corroded. His body, his will, was no longer under his control. He was like a puppet. Buzz! When a hazy light shone from Chinchuan's body, specks of light the size of rice grains slowly flew out from Chinchuan's body. Using the runic sword as a bridge, they flew towards Yu, who was not far away. They slowly merged into Yu's body and then disappeared. Chinchuan could clearly feel that his power, his life force, everything was being drained away. They were all being turned into nutrients to nourish Yu. The only thing he could do was to silently watch all of this happen. Other than that, there was nothing else he could do. Yu looked at the silent Chinchuan, and a morbid joy appeared on his face. He was looking forward to the moment when he became a god of creation. Chinchuan, however, did not have any expectations. A life without oneself was no different from death. If I could live again, perhaps I would stay in the Star Dragon Federation. Perhaps screech. Suddenly, an extremely loud and clear cry resounded in the dim void. Hearing this cry, everyone who was in the process of hurrying on their way stopped one after another, then looked towards Yaorao, who had suddenly stopped with painful expression on her face and was clutching her chest. Yaorao, what happened to you? Seeing the pale complexion of Yaorao, Lu Zi asked with great concern. Yaorao pursed her lips and said in low voice, I feel a wisp of nirvana power is dissipating. Hearing the words of Yaorao, Lu Zi frowned and said, Is there a problem with your body? It's not me. Yaorao raised her head and looked towards Lu Zi, then said with somewhat trembling voice, It's Chinchuan. Hearing the answer of Yaorao, Lu Zi seemed as if she was struck by lightning. Her entire person was dumbfounded, and others anxiously asked Yaorao what the hell was going on. Facing the anxious crowd, Yaorao bit her lips and replied, Chinchuan had consumed Phoenix heart blood in the past, so he possessed a wisp of nirvana power. After I became Phoenix God, I can sense the existence of this wisp of nirvana power. Just a moment ago, I sense that this wisp of nirvana power is slowly dissipating. This means that Chinchuan has encountered great danger, and his life is already in danger. Hearing the explanation of Yaorao, everyone's complexion greatly changed, and Zhou Lin didn't say a word, then turned around and flew towards the direction of Void Empire's imperial city at full speed. Seeing this, other people also didn't say anything, and followed behind Zhou Lin, flying towards the direction of Void Empire's imperial city at full speed. Screech! Yaorao shook her body and changed into a fiery red phoenix, then said to everyone, Everyone get on my back. I want to fly at full speed, and we can arrive at Void Empire's imperial city tomorrow. Everyone jumped on the back of Yaorao without any hesitation, because at this time was everything. Chinchuan. Lu Zi firmly looked towards the direction of Void Empire's imperial city. Even if she had to stake everything, she wouldn't let anything happen to Chinchuan. Chapter 1447. Void Empire, Imperial City. Today's Imperial City was as deserted and quiet as before. Until that fiery red color appeared on the horizon, everything changed. At this moment, everyone could clearly perceive the aura of Chinchuan and Yu. One was incomparably weak, and the other was incomparably powerful. Chinchuan. The moment Lu Zi sensed Chinchuan's aura, she was unable to restrain the excitement in her heart. She jumped up from Yaorao's back and changed into a winding, illusory dragon in the sky. Then she suddenly spouted a group of dragon breath towards the imperial city. When the dragon breath fell into the imperial city, it immediately set off monstrous flame. Chop! Zhou Lin simultaneously jumped up, raised her hand, and condensed a golden sword, and directly chopped towards the imperial city. Immediately, the city walls crumbled and the palace collapsed. It was as if the sky was falling down. Atheist sharply looked at the palace located at the center of the imperial city and said in deep voice, "God said, Qin Chuan, and you will be separated." Along with the voice of Atheist, an extremely mysterious power fell into the palace. However, everything was like a stone sinking into the sea. Other than some ripples, nothing was left behind. Chang Tian bent down and rushed towards the imperial city. He held the sky, concealing jade in his hand, and shot a sparkling and translucent radiance towards the palace. However, when these radiants arrived before the palace, all of them stopped and then dispersed. "Evil!" Demon Emperor shouted in a low voice. He raised his hand and shot a simple and unadorned evil character towards the palace. When the evil character fell on the palace, it suddenly shook, and in the next moment, it loudly dispersed. "Go!" The insect queen transformed into a towering arm and slammed it down at the palace from top to bottom. This palm, which was powerful enough to destroy a planet, could not do anything to the palace at all. Sage Emperor also attacked. His formidable power attacked the palace, but was unable to shake the palace in the slightest. Screech! Yarao looked up to the sky and let out a long cry. Then towards that palace, she spat out a group of blazing flame. When this flame fell on that palace, which was as stable as a boulder, finally showed some signs of melting, and little by little the scene inside the palace appeared in front of everyone. Within the palace, Qin Chuan was seated cross-legged on the floor with his head lowered. In front of him was Yu, who was holding a runic sword. The runic sword was deeply embedded in Qin Chuan's chest, and grain-sized dots of light were continuously flowing from Qin Chuan's body to Yu through the runic sword. When everyone saw this scene, their faces were filled with anger. However, this anger quickly turned into intense shock. This was because they saw that Qin Chuan and Yu looked exactly the same. How could you look the same as Qin Chuan? Chang Tian was greatly shocked, then turned his gaze towards Atheist. Among them, only Atheist had seen you and knew what you looked like. Facing the gaze of Chang Tian, Atheist shook his head and said, "When I first saw you, he was wearing a bronze mask, so I also don't know what you looks like." Hearing Atheist's answer, Demon Emperor frowned and said, "But no matter what you looks like, he shouldn't look exactly the same as Qin Chuan." It could be said that Demon Emperor had spoken the thoughts in everyone's heart. No matter if he was handsome or unrestrained or unbearably ugly, they could accept it. But for you to look exactly the same as Qin Chuan, this matter was really hard for them to accept. From their clothes, the one sitting is indeed Qin Chuan, and the one standing is indeed you. Insect Mother frowned and said, "From their appearance, could it be that Qin Chuan is actually Yu's descendant?" Everyone did not understand, but one thing they were sure of was that Qin Chuan and Yu definitely had a special relationship. No matter what the relationship between Qin Chuan and Yu is, we should first break this charm array and save Qin Chuan. If we delay any longer, Qin Chuan will really die. At this time, Lu Zi was not in the mood to think about these things. She only knew that Qin Chuan was about to be unable to hold on. She had to save Qin Chuan. Hearing Lu Zi's words, everyone's gaze turned towards the charm array that was enveloping Qin Chuan and Yu. This charm array looked like a faint purple membrane, as if it could be broken with a poke, but everyone knew that this was just a facade. When the Sage Emperor tried to attack the defensive array glyphs, his power was suddenly repelled as soon as it came into contact with the thin film. The Sage Emperor was caught completely off guard, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood as a look of shock appeared on his face. The Insect Queen was shocked. She quickly asked, "How are you?" The Saint Emperor shook his head and said, "I'm fine. This charm array is strange. Not only is its defense extremely strong, it can even reflect my attacks. You all have to be careful." With the Saint Emperor as an example, the others did not dare to act rashly. Lu Zi tried to attack the membrane with a weaker strength, but it did not cause any reaction. Looks like only when the strength exceeds a certain limit will it be reflected. Any strength below this limit should be eliminated. I guess this membrane should be at its limit. But if we are unable to test that limit, we might suffer a backlash. LVZ voiced out her conjecture and received everyone's approval. Now that the problem was in front of everyone, if they could not solve this problem, they would not be able to save Qin Chuan. Just when everyone was thinking about how to break this defense glyph array, Yu, who was in the middle of the defense glyph array, slowly turned his head and looked at everyone. He said indifferently, "I really didn't expect that all of you would chase me all the way here." Hearing Yu's words, Lu Zi immediately shouted angrily, "Let go of Qin Chuan." Yu shook his head and said, "I will not let go of Qin Chuan, but I can show you something." As he spoke, Yu raised his right hand and waved lightly in the air. A black image appeared in the air. In the image, Qin Chuan and Yu stood facing each other. "You captured me. Why not just kill me? Why should I kill you?" On the screen, Qin Chuan and Yu's conversation rang out, attracting the attention of everyone present. They had already realized that this should have happened before they arrived. But what was the meaning of you showing them such a thing? Soon, everyone understood Yu's meaning, because you took off the bronze mask, revealing the face that was exactly the same as Qin Chuan's. As the conversation went deeper, when the runic sword appeared from Qin Chuan's body and fell into Yu's hand, everyone finally realized something extremely shocking. Everyone was shocked to the point that their heads went numb, almost to the point where they could not make a sound. Qin Chuan and Yu were originally one. Yu was divinity, Qin Chuan was human. Chapter 1448. The previously noisy imperial city was now so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Everyone's attention was focused on the scene as they listened to Yu's narration of the story of divinity and humanity. They now knew where Qin Chuan came from. Such a reality shocked everyone. Even Lu Zi, Zhou Lin, Yao Rao, and Bai Yu, who were closest to Qin Chuan, were unable to accept this reality. They could not believe that Qin Chuan was actually a part of Yu's humanity. So that's how it is. Chang Tian muttered in a low voice. When he first learned about Qin Chuan, he was extremely surprised because there was actually a person in this world who still retained his humanity and never thought of becoming a god. Now, he finally understood that it was not that Qin Chuan did not want to become a god, but that he never had divinity. How could a person who only had humanity become a god? Atheist stared at Qin Chuan and said in a low voice, "I understand now. No wonder you attacked the ancestral dragon without hesitation and killed billions of creatures. It was because you had already cut off your humanity and only left behind your divinity. Gods were high and mighty, so why would they care about mere mortals?" "I don't believe it." Zhou Lin could not accept this reality. It was not only Zhou Lin who could not accept it. Whether it was Lu Zi, Yao Rao, or Bai Yu, they could not accept the fact that Qin Chuan was a part of Yu's humanity. "Qin Chuan is my friend, a classmate I met in the Black Moon Combat Academy. He is definitely not a part of humanity." Bai Yu clenched her teeth as she looked at Qin Chuan, whose chest was pierced by Yu's runic sword. She felt extremely sad. Hearing Bai Yu's words, Yu indifferently said, "The truth does not need anyone to admit it or believe it. The truth is right there. Those who believe it will naturally believe it. Those who do not believe it will not believe it even if they die." Moreover, Yu indifferently looked at Bai Yu and said, "Even Qin Chuan himself believed it. What reason do you have to not believe it?" Yu's words were like a sharp sword that pierced everyone's heart. From Qin Chuan's performance in the video, they could see that Qin Chuan absolutely believed everything you said. Qin Chuan could not find any reason to refute you, and they also could not find any reason to refute you. In this way, everything could only be true. The world is truly unpredictable, the world. The Devil Emperor really did not know what to say at this moment. They had placed their hopes on Qin Chuan, but in the end, Qin Chuan was Yu. This was simply like a huge joke. All of them were toyed with by Yu. Now, do we still want to save him or not? Seeing Qinchuan's aura was getting weaker and weaker, Saint Emperor tightly wrinkled his brows. He didn't have any special feelings for Qinchuan. He didn't care about Qinchuan's life or death, but he had to care about Yu's strength. If Qinchuan's death could make you incomparably powerful, then he would rather have Qinchuan alive. Of course, we have to save him. Lu Zi's tone was extremely firm. No matter what the identity of Qinchuan was, they couldn't sit idly by and watch Qinchuan die in the hands of you. Screech. Yaorao had always been an action-oriented person. When she decided to save Qinchuan, she immediately let out a long screech, then opened her mouth and spat out a group of blazing flame, which was shot towards the defensive array formation with a loud bang. The instant that flame hit the defensive array formation, that fireball was immediately bounced back, and its speed was so fast that it almost instantly arrived in front of Yaorao. But Yaorao was already prepared. She opened her mouth and swallowed that bounce-back fireball into her mouth, and unexpectedly absorbed it back. Everyone felt the scorching high temperature all around, and all of them wrinkled their brows. Based on the previous attack of Yaorao, no matter who it was, all of them had to be very careful to block it, but that defensive array formation, however, easily bounced back that fireball. This bouncing ability was a bit too abnormal. As if nothing had happened, Yaorao once again launched an attack towards the defensive array glyphs. This time, the fireball she spat out was even more powerful compared to the previous fireball, but it still didn't have any effect. Roar! Lu Zi once again transformed into a illusory dragon and used dragon breath to attack the defensive array formation. Her illusion technique wasn't good at pure attack. In the past, Lu Zi didn't think there was anything bad about it, but now she really longed for more powerful strength. Looking at Lu Zi and Yaorao, who were crazily attacking the defensive array formation, Yu indifferently said, "It's no use. This defensive array formation of mine is called extreme defense, meaning extreme defense. This, however, is the only level 10 defensive array formation that I have researched for many years. Its defensive ability is very strong. Even if all of you attack together, it's still impossible to break its defense, so you all better give up as soon as possible." "We will absolutely not give up," Zhou Lin roared. Holding the golden sword in her hand, she swooped down and ruthlessly chopped down on extreme defense. However, this sword not only failed to cause any damage to extreme defense, instead it caused Zhou Lin to suffer from backlash, and her body was seriously injured. F***K. Demon Emperor clenched his teeth and similarly launched an attack on extreme defense. He didn't care whether Yu's words were true or false. He only knew that if he didn't go all out now, then after Yu completely absorbed Qinchuan's power, it would be too late for him to go all out. At this moment, Saint Emperor, Insect Mother, Atheist, and Heaven simultaneously attacked. Each of them used their full strength. However, this kind of power that was enough to destroy the universe, in front of extreme defense, was completely useless. Puff! Saint Emperor violently vomited blood. This was the first time he suffered such serious injury since he became Saint Emperor. Insect Mother's situation was also very bad. As a divine tool, she actually had a faint feeling of collapse. Demon Emperor swore that this was the first time in his life that he was risking his life for a person that he didn't have any relationship with. Moreover, he was risking his life. Heaven again and again recalled the warning passed down from the first-generation Heaven. Unless it is absolutely necessary, don't become Yu's enemy. If you want to become Yu's enemy, then you must fight to the death. Now was the time for him to fight to the death. Atheist had already been defeated by Yu once tens of millions of years ago, and at that time he had been utterly defeated, with practically no room to fight back. This time, he was making a comeback, and even if he was going to lose, he would first viciously bite off a piece of flesh from Yu's body. Bai Yu, who had turned into the Hope, slammed heavily into extreme defense, the huge impact making her feel like her bones were about to shatter. But none of this could compare to the pain and sadness of losing the most important friend in her life. If Qinchuan had to die, then she had to die before Qinchuan. Chapter 1449. You looked at those people who were launching a deadly attack towards Yu's pole. His face could not help but reveal a touch of pity, as if he was pitying these people. Qin Chuan, do you see this? These people are risking their lives to save you. Not sure if Qin Chuan, who was sitting on the floor, heard Yu's words. He did not have any reaction, just like a clay statue, muddle-headed. You did not care about Qin Chuan's reaction. He sighed and said, 10 years of time, it's just a snap of the fingers. You could get to know so many friends, so many confidants, making them willing to die for you. This is really a very surprising thing. Your charm is much bigger than what I imagined. While speaking, you turned his head and looked at Qin Chuan, somewhat curiously asked, don't you want to say anything? Are you just going to watch these people die for you? This time, Qin Chuan finally had some reaction. He raised his head with some difficulty. Looking at you, his voice was hoarse and low. Let them go. You laughed. He laughed very happily. Every time he saw Qin Chuan's compassionate look, thinking about the righteousness of others, he really wanted to laugh. This person was obviously going to die, but he still wanted to plead for others. So, is this human nature? You are really too interesting. Don't worry. After you die, I will send them to Nine Nether to reunite with you. Otherwise, you will be too lonely in Nine Nether alone. You chuckled. His right hand slightly exerted force, and the rune sword pierced deeper into Qin Chuan's body. Seeing this scene, the people outside were all furious. They heard the conversation between you and Qin Chuan clearly. They were incomparably furious. As if they were crazy, they wanted to break Yu's pole and pull Qin Chuan back from the edge of death. Let him go, Lu Zi painfully shouted. She looked on helplessly as Yu's rune sword pierced deeply into Qin Chuan's chest. She saw the golden blood flowing down along the blade, dripping onto the floor, making a plop sound, but she was powerless to stop all of this. You, even if you become a god of creation, I'll still slay gods. Zhou Lin's expression was cold. Her gaze was fixed on Yu. She had never wanted to kill someone as much as she did now. She wanted to kill a god. Screech. The divine phoenix's gigantic body slammed into the imperial pole ferociously. An extremely powerful impact swept out in all directions. However, the imperial pole did not budge at all. Looking at the scene outside, you coldly smiled and said, since you all have so much energy, then I will accompany you all to play. As he spoke, you took out a purple talisman and lightly tossed it into the sky. The purple talisman passed through Yu's pole and came to the outside. It combusted without any fire and turned into an extremely evil and sinister bronze door. Chang Tian was extremely familiar with this gate because he had once seen this move when he faced Zadie. This gate could connect to the underworld and release evil spirits. It was an extremely evil move. However, compared to the gate that Zadier had summoned back then, the bronze gate in front of them was much larger. Everyone, be careful. This is a gate that connects to the underworld. It can release evil spirits. Chang Tian warned everyone in a timely manner to prevent anyone from failing miserably. When everyone heard Chang Tian's warning, their gazes immediately turned vigilant as they looked at the bronze gate. The underworld had always been the land of death in legends. They did not expect that someone could actually connect to the underworld. Connect to the underworld, reveal the 100 ghosts. Following Yu's low roar, the bronze gate slowly opened. The whimpering howls of ghosts immediately sounded from the gap in the gate. In an instant, the entire imperial city seemed to have turned into a ghost town with gusts of sinister wind. Ghosts of all shapes and sizes flew out from the bronze gate one after another. They either had horns on their heads and faces like cows and horses, or had 8 arms and 8 legs, and a ferocious face with fangs exposed. Just like that, 100 ghosts of all shapes and sizes flew out from the bronze gate in a short period of time and occupied the entire sky. Everyone looked at the 100 ghosts in shock. Everyone could clearly sense that even the weakest of these ghosts was at least at the level of a demigod, while the strongest was comparable to a perfected existence. Moreover, it wasn't just 1 or 2 of them, but more than 10 of them. The power of these 100 ghosts added together was enough to destroy the universe. Seeing the shocked expression on everyone's face, you revealed a satisfied smile, then said to everyone, "Now, let's start your performance. If you can't even defeat 100 ghosts, then you don't have the qualifications to face me." Along with Yu's voice, those 100 ghosts, as if soldiers who had received an order, rushed towards everyone below. Upon seeing this, Yaorao immediately opened her mouth and spouted out a blazing flame. This phoenix god fire could be said to be the most yang flame in the universe. Its restraining effect on ghosts was extremely strong. Every ghost that was touched by phoenix god fire issued extremely mournful, blood-curdling screams. But facing 100 ghosts, this insignificant flame was clearly not enough. On the other side, Zhou Lin brandished the golden sword in her hand and slew several demigod-level ghosts in succession. Then, she was targeted by a ghost that was comparable to a perfected existence. Dense Yin energy surged toward her, and a great battle was about to break out. Luzi used her illusory space to envelop several dozen ghosts in an instant. Even if they were powerful ghosts, they were unable to escape from this terrifying charm ability. Chang Tian held Tian Sangyu. Saint Emperor and Insect Queen fought side by side. Demon Emperor held Evil Grimoire, and his demeanor was even more ghostly than ghosts, and Baiyu transformed into Hope and rampaged. At this moment, everyone displayed their strength, just like 8 immortals crossing the sea, each showing their magical ability. You looked at the battlefield outside, chuckled, and said, "Truly a wonderful performance. Quickly look, your friends are really working hard, really going all out." Qin Chuan slowly turned his head, casting his gloomy gaze towards the outside. He saw the resolute expressions on the faces of the crowd, as well as the resolute expressions on their faces. At this moment, he should have been fighting alongside them outside. But right now, he was nothing but a prisoner. Other than watching with his own eyes, there was nothing he could do. You must be in great pain, seeing your friends and family die in front of you with your own eyes. The pain is enough to drive anyone crazy. You sighed, as if he was really just a spectator and not the main culprit who caused this scene. Soon, very soon, I can already sense that there isn't much energy left in your body. After I absorb all of your energy, I'll be able to become a god of creation, and you'll be able to travel to the netherworld and become one of the 100 ghosts. I wonder if your friends and family will still be able to recognize you if you appear on the battlefield? You laughed wildly. Chapter 1450. Awu. The entire body of Ghost burning with dark green-colored flame, as if a vicious dog pounced towards Yaorao. Suddenly, several tins of fiery red feathers shot out from Yaorao's body, and as if sharp arrows, those feathers pierced through that vicious dog. At the same time, those feathers also pierced through several ghosts around that vicious dog. On the other side, when a bat-like ghost opened its wings and tried to wrap around the Saint Emperor, the insect queen suddenly transformed into a huge white arm and grabbed the ghost's wings. Then, the ghost was directly crushed into a cloud of ghost mist. Kill! Zhou Lin held the golden sword in her hand and attacked continuously. In the blink of an eye, she stabbed out millions of times and chopped a horned ghost into millions of pieces. In the dreamland created by LVZ, dozens of ghosts saw each other as the greatest enemies in their lives. They fought and killed each other, not stopping until they were dead. The Demon King held the evil grimoire in his hand. Every time the evil grimoire lit up, a ghost would disappear and turn into a picture imprinted on the evil grimoire. On the Tianzong jade in Heaven's hand, a gentle jade light shone down on the earth. The ghosts had nowhere to hide and were turned into ashes. The Ark of Hope was like a towering tree as it rampaged through the imperial city. Everywhere it passed, everything was crushed into dust. Atheist was like a true god standing in the clouds. Every time he raised his hand and pointed at a ghost, that ghost would definitely submit under the divine light of Atheist and disappear into thin air. At this moment, everyone was fighting and attacking the ghosts with all their might. They had to defeat the ghosts in front of them, so that they could face you again and have the hope of saving Qinchuan. Looking at the scene before him, you couldn't help but think of those people from millions of years ago. At that time, he was like Qinchuan. He had friends, brothers, and family. Everyone was happy together, advancing and retreating together. He didn't give up on anyone. At that time, he was weak but happy. Now, he was incomparably powerful, but lonely. Even though he had become a god of creation, there was no one who could share this joy with him. The universe is so big, but I don't even have a single person to talk to. Since that's the case, then let this universe be destroyed. You looked deeply at Qinchuan, who was lying on the ground. Then, he forcefully pulled out the runic sword from Qinchuan's chest. At the moment when the runic sword was pulled out of Qinchuan's chest, Qinchuan's last breath seemed to have been sucked out. Plop! Qinchuan's body softly fell to the ground. His life force dissipated, and there was no breath. The sound of Qinchuan falling to the ground was not loud, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder that exploded in everyone's ears. At this moment, everyone stopped what they were doing and turned their heads to look at Qinchuan, who was in the middle of the defense. Looking at Qinchuan, who had already fallen to the ground and whose aura could not be sensed, everyone's eyes turned red. They had tried their best and were not afraid of death, but they were still unable to save Qinchuan. Qinchuan, Qinchuan, Qinchuan. Burst after burst of extremely mournful shouts resounded. Lu Zi was like a mad devil. She rushed towards Yu's pole. She wanted to hug Qinchuan, but was firmly blocked by Yu's pole. Zhou Lin's eyes were red as she stared at Qinchuan, who was lying on the ground. She clenched her teeth so hard that they were about to break. Since the death of her father, this was the first time she experienced that heart-wrenching pain. Yaorao changed back to her human form from phoenix god form. She blankly stared at Qinchuan, who was lying on the ground. At this moment, she recalled that moment when she was secretly kissed on the flower. That night at the bonfire party where dragons and phoenixes showed signs of prosperity. She risked life and limb in Sky Phoenix Plain, as well as that time when they sat on the roof and chatted after being separated for a long time. It turned out that she had never truly let go. While the others were paying attention to Qinchuan, the Devil Emperor, Saint Emperor, and Insect Queen were paying attention to you. At this moment, Yu was standing on the spot with his runic sword in hand. His eyes were slightly closed, as if he was preparing for something. It was like the calm before the storm, causing everyone's heart to palpitate. When a golden light, a silver light, and a purple light burst forth from Yu's body and intertwined in the air to form a vast and mighty power, the Demon Emperor and the others realized that they had failed to stop you in the end. You had still taken that final step to obtain the power of a god of creation and become a god of creation. Their plan had failed in the end. Kacha. Following a crisp crack, the indestructible extreme defense shattered. It wasn't broken by someone from the outside, but rather by the vast and mighty power of the god of creation. At this moment, Yu was no longer in the mood to pay attention to the pole of defense. All of his attention was focused on the Genesis divine power above his head. His eyes were blazing and his heart was pounding. This was the power he had always dreamed of. Today, he had finally obtained it. When you stretched out his hand to absorb the Genesis divine power into his body, something unexpected happened. The Genesis divine power did not move and had no intention of fusing with you. Yu was a little surprised. The creation god's power was formed from the fusion of space, time, and void energy in his body. Now that he wanted to fuse with the creation god's power, it should have been a matter of course. Why was the creation god's power not affected? This was not logical. Just as Yu was puzzled, the others also noticed this strange situation. Although Yu had fused with the Genesis divine power, he did not seem to have the ability to absorb it. The people who were originally in despair suddenly felt a burst of hope. As long as you did not obtain the Genesis divine power, they still had a chance to turn the tables. Could it be because of him? Yu turned his head and looked at Qinchuan. At this moment, Qinchuan was in Lu Zi's embrace. Qinchuan was obviously not breathing, but in Yu's eyes, there was still a trace of life. And this trace of life was in the body of Yaorao. He wanted to completely destroy Qinchuan, destroy this trace of life. Only then could he fuse with the Genesis divine power. Just as he was about to make his move, Devil Emperor, Saint Emperor, and Insect Queen attacked you from different directions. Song Tian, an atheist, also attacked you from a distance. They did not have any discussion in advance, and purely subconsciously made a joint attack. On the other side, Yaorao quickly arrived beside Qinchuan, and without any explanation, she took Qinchuan from Lu Zi's embrace and retreated. "You guys stop you. I can save Qinchuan." Yaorao's words were like the last life-saving straw, which was firmly grasped by Lu Zi and others. They turned around and entered the battlefield without any hesitation to face you. They wanted to buy enough time for Yaorao to save Qinchuan. Chapter 1451. While carrying Qinchuan, Yaorao left the battlefield and arrived at the edge of the imperial city. After that, she lowered her head and looked at the pale and lifeless Qinchuan in her bosom, and her eyes couldn't help but flash with a touch of grief. "Qinchuan, if I can turn back time and give me another chance, then I won't pretend to be so free and easy. Even if I still lose in the end, I will still fight one more time. I know you can't hear this, but I really still like you." Speaking till here, Yaorao took a deep breath. Then she once again changed into divine phoenix form, spread her wings, and embraced Qinchuan into her bosom. Meanwhile, nirvana power flowed out from Yaorao's body toward Qinchuan. Now, only nirvana power could save Qinchuan. On the distant battlefield, when you sensed that Yaorao was using nirvana power to save Qinchuan, he was thoroughly angry. He had never thought that his perfect plan would actually fail because of the sudden appearance of Divine Phoenix, and he would absolutely not allow such a thing to happen. "All of you get lost." You furiously roared, and powerful space divine power burst out from his body, instantly pushing everyone to thousands of miles away. When you wanted to go and kill Yaorao and destroy her plan, Lu Zi, who had changed into Phantom Dragon, suddenly attacked from afar and firmly wrapped around Yu's body. Yu violently raised his hand and punched out, and powerful force directly penetrated the body of Phantom Dragon, nearly breaking the body of Phantom Dragon. But even so, Lu Zi still didn't let go. "Since you like to court death so much, then I will fulfill your wish." Yu roared, then raised his hand and grabbed the wound of Phantom Dragon. Then, exerting his strength, he ruthlessly tore apart the solid body of Phantom Dragon, and blood sprinkled in the vast sky. The pain of her body being torn apart made Lu Zi, who had transformed into Phantom Dragon, immediately howl in grief, and her aura instantly withered. On the other hand, Baiyu transformed from the Hope into the Forest of Eternity and rammed her landmass into Yu. Yu, who originally wanted to kill Lu Zi, snorted coldly when he saw this. He raised his hand and punched out. Boundless void, god power, surged out and instantly enveloped the entire eternal forest. The lush trees that had grown for countless years withered and died in an instant. Before the eternal forest could reach you, it turned back into Baiyu and fell to the ground. Evil descends. The Nephilim Emperor held the evil grimoire in his hand, and threw all the evil items recorded in the evil grimoire towards you. Facing this attack, you sneered and said in a deep voice, "Evil descends? Is there anyone more evil than me in this world?" You roared in a low voice and used his time divine power to block the attack. In front of the silvery white time divine power, the evil creatures that flew out from the evil grimoire all returned to the evil grimoire. Not only that, the evil grimoire also underwent an astonishing change. It turned from an evil grimoire to an ordinary grimoire. The time divine power actually caused the evil grimoire to revert back to the time before it became a half-divine tool. After the evil grimoire was heavily damaged, the Nephilim Emperor, who had a spiritual connection with it, immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at the evil grimoire in his hand, which had turned into trash, and his heart ached to the extreme. "Kill! The Nephilim Emperor and Insect Queen attacked you together. The Insect Queen used her power or desire to tempt you to temporarily give up on chasing after Chinchuan and try to fuse with the creation god power. But the Nephilim Emperor opened his mouth and spat out a dark green pearl which flew towards you. Puff! The moment this dark green pearl got close to you, it suddenly exploded and turned into a green screen which covered the sky and covered the sun, enveloping you within it. Seeing you being enveloped by the green screen, the Nephilim Emperor's face couldn't help but reveal a trace of excitement. This green screen was made from the world's most viscous insect liquid. As long as someone was trapped within it, they wouldn't be able to struggle free. Even if he was very strong, it would at least be able to trap you for a short period of time to buy enough time for Yarao. Although the Nephilim Emperor wasn't sure if the resurrected Chinchuan would be able to defeat you, this was their only hope now. The Insect Queen once again transformed into a gigantic palm that blotted out the sky and pressed down on the green screen. However, just as the Insect Queen was about to suppress the green screen, an extremely shocking void divine power suddenly erupted from the green screen. It almost instantly pierced through the green screen and met the Insect Queen head-on. Bang! In the midst of an earth-shattering explosion, the Insect Queen was sent flying, and Yu's figure also rushed out of the green screen. How is this possible? The Nephilim Emperor couldn't believe it. You had actually used only a short period of time to break through the green screen. You looked at the Nephilim Emperor and coldly snorted. I have already experienced your Zerg's mucus millions of years ago. After so many years, you still haven't improved at all. How disappointing. Whoosh! As he spoke, Yu's figure had already arrived in front of the Nephilim Emperor. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the Nephilim Emperor's hair and fiercely pressed his head down. At the same time, he raised his knee and directly struck the Nephilim Emperor's head. In an instant, the Nephilim Emperor's head exploded like a balloon. No! The Insect Queen saw this scene from afar and immediately let out an incomparably shrill scream. Whoosh! A crystal-clear and gentle light shone from afar and landed on the Nephilim Emperor's body. It took the Nephilim Emperor away from Yu's hand and preserved the Nephilim Emperor's life force. God said that one can live without a head. Atheus came to the Nephilim Emperor's side and raised his hand to lightly touch the Nephilim Emperor's neck. The Nephilim Emperor's head regrew, but when the Nephilim Emperor's head was halfway regenerated, Yu suddenly appeared behind Atheus and raised his runic sword to pierce through Atheus's chest. You really like to be a busybody. You looked at Atheus with some disgust. Just as he was about to kill Atheus, a golden blade flew from afar and aimed at the center of his brows. Left with no choice, you could only pull out his rune sword and raise his hand to block the attack. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Heaven carried Atheus and the Holy Emperor away from you. At the same time, Zhou Lin's figure appeared in front of you, and with extreme speed, she swung her sword thousands of times at you. Boring! He let out a low growl and once again raised his hand to summon the rune sword. One sword to break 10,000 spells. Puffed. Zhou Lin was hit by the runic sword and spat out blood, but he was still unharmed. On the other side, Atheus finally helped the Nephilim Emperor regenerate his head. However, the Nephilim Emperor's vitality was still greatly damaged, and his battle strength was less than 10%. Although ultimate existences are said to be immortal and indestructible, if their bodies receive a fatal attack, there is still the danger of dying. Atheus looked at the weak Nephilim Emperor and said, "Don't participate in the battle for now, or you will really die." Hearing Atheus's words, the Nephilim Emperor nodded and said, "Thank you." The Insect Queen also came to the Nephilim Emperor's side. When she saw that the Nephilim Emperor was fine, she cried tears of joy. Heaven turned to look at you and said in despair, "Even if he did not obtain the Genesis God's power, we are still no match for him." Chapter 1452. Hearing Chang Tian's words, whether it was the Insect Queen, the Holy King, or even Atheus, all of them looked helpless. They had all taken turns to attack you, but they had not been able to cause any harm to him. They had only managed to slow him down a little. If this happened a few more times, they would no longer have the strength to stop you, and everything would be over. But what else can we do? The insect queen was in despair. With so many of them combined, they could not even defeat one you. If they allowed you to obtain the Creator God's power, they would all die without a burial ground. Fight! Chang Tian gritted his teeth and threw out the Tian Tsang Jade again. This time, he directly used all of the Tian Tsang Jade's power. After this attack, the Tian Tsang Jade would lose its spirituality and become an ordinary object. An extremely bright jade light poured out from the Tian Tsang Jade and sprinkled around you, turning into a crystal clear and sturdy prison, trapping you within it. Chang Tian did not know how long this move could trap you, but this was the best he could do. Facing the prison formed by the jade light, you frowned slightly. He raised his hand and swung his sword. However, this swing of his sword only managed to cut off some of the jade light and did not break the prison. However, even though the prison was not broken apart, the face of Firmament was pale as though he had just received a heavy blow. Looking at this, you understood in his heart that the might of that sword slash must have been transferred to Firmament by the prison. Or perhaps both Firmament and the prison must have borne the brunt of it together. Do you think you can trap me like this? What a joke. Just as he was about to swing his sword again, a light purple flower suddenly grew on his arm. Meng Manji, Lu Zi, who was covered in blood, stood in the distance. Her breathing was extremely weak, but her eyes were filled with determination and light as she stared at you. Bastard, he was extremely embarrassed. These people were clearly no match for him, but they were like sticky candy that could not be chased away. 10,000 swords. Zhou Lin's angry roar came from afar. Above the imperial city, countless golden swords appeared and rained down on you, who was in the prison cell. Under the imprisonment of the Jade Light prison, you was unable to escape. However, the strange thing was that the attacks from the outside world could touch you. The rain of swords locked onto Yu's figure and launched a fierce attack. Every sword was the embodiment of Zhou Lin's anger, full of aggression and invasiveness. Under Meng Man Ji's interference, although you did not fall into the dreamland, his reaction speed was unavoidably slower. Occasionally, there would be swords stabbing into him. Although it did not cause him any harm, it caused Yu's mood to be incomparably irritated. Get out of my way. You finally couldn't take it anymore. He roared and unleashed the godly power of time. In an instant, the 10,000 swords turned upside down and the branches of dreams disappeared. Even the Jade Light prison collapsed. Once again, everyone's attempt turned out to be futile. Facing you, who controlled the power of time, everyone tasted the taste of despair again and again. But every time, new hope burst forth, and they bravely moved forward. Sword come, Zhou Lin roared. The gold godly power in her body surged out and condensed into a huge golden sword in her palm. She slashed it towards you. Purple star godly eyes. Lu Zi activated her purple star godly eyes. A dreamy light shot towards you and turned into obstacles around him. Facing Zhou Lin and Lu Zi's attack again, you was extremely embarrassed and angry. I said, get out of my way. Don't you understand? You furiously swung the runic sword in his hand. The godly power of void gushed out and turned into a void sword chi, destroying everything in front of him. Zhou Lin and Lu Zi suffered from the backlash and suffered heavy injuries. At this moment, the two of them were on the verge of death, but they still did not retreat. They still wanted to fight with their lives on the line. Light of Hope. Baiyu's figure appeared above Lu Zi and Zhou Lin. A soft green light flowed out from her body and fell on Lu Zi and Zhou Lin. It healed Lu Zi and Zhou Lin's injuries and accelerated their recovery. Kill. He did not want to give Lu Zi and Baiyu any chance to recover. He held the runic sword in his hand and charged towards Zhou Lin, who was closest to him. Just as he was about to reach Zhou Lin, the Nephilim King suddenly appeared in front of him and blocked his path. Evil Eye. The Nephilim king roared. His right eye abruptly emitted a sinister black light that shot straight at you. At such a close distance, you was caught off guard and was hit by the black light. The next moment, the black light dyed you's body black and began to corrode his body. Break! You used the god of time again in reverse time. The black light returned to the Nephilim king's eye. But you did not retreat. Instead, he charged forward and stabbed the Nephilim king's right eye. Ah! The Nephilim king screamed in pain. The evil eye was the Nephilim king's lifeline. If anything happened to it, his life would be in danger. God said, "Shut up." Atheist was about to use the power of will to protect the Nephilim king. But before he could finish, he was violently interrupted by you. The god of space completely sealed the space around Atheist. Atheist could not move his hands or speak. He was like a statue. At the same time, you clenched his left hand into a fist and punched the Nephilim king's chest. The god of space's power surged out and crushed the Nephilim king's body into dust. The Nephilim king fell just like that. Rumble. The moment the Nephilim king fell, the universe mourned. The power of evil law turned into black raindrops that fell from the sky, casting a shadow over everyone's heart. In the end, someone had fallen. This was something that everyone had been mentally prepared to accept a long time ago. But when it really happened, everyone felt extremely sad in their hearts. Now they had let go of their past grudges and grudges. Everyone was working hard to defeat you. They supported each other. But in the end, someone was still left behind. This is the result of going against me. You roared madly. He wanted to kill everyone in front of him. Not a single one would be left alive. Hearing you's crazy roar, the Nephilim king stood up with difficulty and said to the insect queen, "I want to join the battle. Let's join the battle together." The insect queen did not persuade the Nephilim king not to join the battle. Instead, she chose to join the battle with the Nephilim king. If the Nephilim king could be sacrificed, so could they. Since the battle had reached this stage, there was nothing they could not lose. Chapter 1453. Chong Tian glanced at Ares, who was frozen in place, and then looked down at the Tian Tsang jade in his hand, which had already lost its luster. A look of determination flashed across his eyes. The sky Tsomping jade has been destroyed, and behind me are the Tian people. I have no way out, and I have nothing left to lose. Chong Tian carefully put away the sky Tsomping jade. He could die, but the sky Tsomping jade could not be damaged. When the insect queen and the saint king rushed towards you, you was so angry that he laughed. You really don't know what's good for you. Since you don't cherish the chance to live, I'll send you on your way. In the face of Yu's death warning, the insect queen and the saint emperor did not seem to hear it. The insect queen turned back into a white glove and merged with the saint emperor's right arm. When you swung his runic sword at him, the saint emperor reached out his right hand and grabbed the blade of the runic sword. "Let go of me!" The saint emperor roared and tore with all his might, forcefully snatching the runic sword from Yu's hands. Whoosh! The saint king threw the runic sword far away, and it disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the insect queen's white glove disappeared as well. With the insect queen controlling the runic sword, you would not be able to summon it back in a short period of time. Are you trying so hard just to snatch the runic sword away from me? You looked at the saint king coldly. Do you think I'm so strong because of the runic sword? That's a little too laughable. The saint emperor panted slightly as he stared coldly at you. Of course, he knew that Yu's strength did not solely depend on the runic sword. However, he also knew that without the runic sword, Yu's strength would definitely be weakened. Almost silently, Yu's figure appeared in front of the Saint King. He reached out and grabbed the Saint King's neck. The Saint King wanted to dodge, but the space around him had been frozen. Even if he was a supreme existence, he would not be able to break free in a short period of time. You grabbed the Saint King by the throat and raised him up high. I couldn't kill you in one blow just now, but now, let's see who can save you. Me too. Heaven's roar came from afar. The divine power of oath turned into an iron chain and wrapped itself around Yu's body, restricting his movements. With the heavens as my witness, don't even think about hurting anyone else. Looking at Chang Tian's determined expression, a look of disdain appeared on Yu's face as he said, "Do you think a mere divine power of oath can restrain my actions? Ridiculous." As Yu's voice fell, an extremely powerful force suddenly erupted from his body. That aura was vast and mighty, and it was actually exactly the same as the Genesis God's power that was quietly floating in the sky. In the face of this terrifying power, Chang Tian was horrified. He didn't expect you to be hiding God of creation's power. However, the heavens soon discovered that this power, which was similar to the God of creation's power, didn't come from you. Instead, it came from Fingerbone. This made Chang Tian involuntarily think of the leg bone that Zadir had used to deal with him. Zadir had once boasted that the leg bone came from the God of creation, and they all thought it was a lie. However, now that he saw the finger bone in Yu's hand, he suddenly realized that this finger bone really came from the God of creation. Or perhaps, Zadir's leg bone really did come from the God of creation, but all the power in the God of creation's remains have been concentrated in this finger bone in Yu's hand. This is the finger bone of the God of creation. After the God of creation fell, it gathered all the power left behind by the God of creation and turned into a divine weapon. Using it to deal with you guys is really overkill. Hearing Yu's words, Chang Tian felt despair. After the Saint King and the Insect Queen forcefully took away the runic sword, he thought that their chances of winning had increased slightly. However, who would have thought that Yu was still hiding such a shocking trump card? Under Yu's control, the finger bone of the God of creation gently slid across the chain formed by the divine power of oath. There was almost no resistance as it easily tore the chain formed by the divine power of oath into pieces. The moment the chain broke, Chang Tian suffered a huge backlash. Yu, who had regained his freedom, used the Saint King in his hand as a war hammer and viciously swung it at Chang Tian. Bang! The Heavenly King and Chang Tian's bodies collided, resulting in a deafening explosion. At the same time, the Imperial General's fingerbone once again pointed at the Heavenly King and Chang Tian. A vast and majestic power descended, instantly turning the Heavenly King and Chang Tian into ashes. Rumble. In the universe, the sound of the collapse caused by the fall of a god rang out once again. The whimpering sound of the wind was like the wailing of someone sad and sorrowful. Bastard. After personally witnessing the fall of the Saint King, Chang Tian, and the Nephilim King, Lu Zi's heart was filled with grief. Two clear lines of tears flowed from the corners of her eyes, down her cheeks, and dripped onto the ground. Zhou Lin's emotions were no better than Lu Zi's. At this moment, her hatred for Yu had reached its peak. If she could, even if she had to die, she would definitely stab Yu viciously in the chest. Only the three of you are left. Who wants to die first? After dealing with the Saint King and Chang Tian, you slowly turn around and looked at Lu Zi, Zhou Lin, and Bai Yu. Previously, so many supreme existences were unable to affect him at all. Now that only the three of them were left, he no longer had any regard for them. Sharp metal sword. Zhou Lin did not hesitate. She gathered all the divine energy in her body and turned it into a slender and sharp blade. She cut through the air and pierced towards Yu's chest. Facing this sharp metal sword, Yu smiled coldly and was about to use his fingerbone to block it. However, the fingerbone suddenly lost control and began to struggle violently, as if it wanted to throw itself into the Creator God's divine energy in the sky. This sudden turn of events caught Yu off guard, and he wasn't able to block the golden blade in time. When he tried to use other methods to block the attack of the golden blade had already pierced through his chest and came out of his body. This was the first time Yu had been injured since the beginning of the battle. The intense pain stimulated Yu's nerves, causing him to almost cry out in pain. The expression on his face became incomparably ferocious and terrifying. Seeing this, Zhou Lin immediately controlled the sharp metal sword to attack again. Meanwhile, Lu Zi took the opportunity to make her move. One after another, Dream blossoms grew on the wound on Yu's chest. Divine power of time, time reversal. In this extremely dangerous situation, you had no choice but to use the divine power of time again to reverse time. However, this time, the speed of time reversal was much slower than before. No matter how powerful Yu was, the heaven-defying technique of time reversal could not be used without limit. This gave Lu Zi and Zhou Lin a glimmer of hope. Chapter 1454. Far away, Yaorao was in the process of wholeheartedly injecting nirvana power into Qinchuan's body. She was somewhat aware of what was happening on the battlefield, but at this moment she couldn't be distracted, so she could only secretly increase the speed of injecting nirvana power. As Yaorao injected more and more nirvana power into Qinchuan's body, Yaorao's aura also gradually began to weaken, but Qinchuan still didn't have any intention of waking up. Qinchuan, quickly wake up. Qinchuan, all of us are waiting for you. Don't continue to sleep. Qinchuan, so many people have already sacrificed themselves. We really need you. Yaorao nervously and expectantly looked at Qinchuan, hoping that Qinchuan would wake up, but Qinchuan seemed as if he didn't hear her voice and didn't show any sign of waking up. This shouldn't be Seeing Qinchuan still hadn't woken up, Yaorao somewhat panicked. Qinchuan once possessed nirvana power within his body, and now she was injecting even more nirvana power into Qinchuan's body, and Qinchuan ought to be able to rely on this nirvana power to be reborn, but looking at the situation of Qinchuan now, it seems her idea was wrong. Qinchuan also wouldn't wake up again. This is impossible. Yaorao was unwilling to accept this reality. Now everyone was risking their lives to save Qinchuan. If she couldn't resurrect Qinchuan, then wouldn't the hard work of others be in vain? How could those sacrificed people be at peace under the 9 underworlds? Thinking of this, Yaorao put even more effort into injecting nirvana power into Qinchuan's body, completely disregarding whether this would cause permanent damage to herself or not. Now the only thought in her mind was to resurrect Qinchuan, then help Qinchuan defeat you. Qinchuan sat on the boundless prairie, gazing at the distant blue sky and the drifting white clouds. He then lowered his head to look at the herds of cattle and sheep that lowered their heads to graze on the prairie. Listening to the melodious sound of the horsehead zither coming from the other side of the mountain, he felt extremely relaxed and content. Qinchuan didn't know why he was here, nor did he know what kind of state he was in. He couldn't remember what had happened before, nor did he know what year it was. The scenery here is so beautiful, and the environment is so beautiful, but why do I always feel a little empty in my heart? Qinchuan lay on the grass, chewing on a grass root. His face was full of confusion. He did not know what was missing in his heart, but he felt that it was very important and wanted to find it. However, the more he tried to search and recall, the more blurry his memories became. The more he couldn't remember anything. After repeated attempts, Qinchuan simply gave up. Anyway, his current state of life was pretty good. He was very satisfied and very satisfied. Qinchuan, when an anxious and choked voice sounded in Qinchuan's ears, Qinchuan's heart felt like it was being ruthlessly squeezed by someone. He suddenly sat up and looked around, trying to find the person who called his name, but to no avail. Who is it? Who is calling me? Qinchuan stood up and asked loudly in all directions. However, only the sound of the wind and the cries of the cattle and sheep responded to him. Other than that, there was no other sound. Just when Qinchuan thought that it was just an illusion, the voice appeared again. Qinchuan, I beg you, please wake up. When he heard the voice calling out to him, the urgency and grief in the voice made Qinchuan feel incomparably sad and irritated. He wanted to know who was calling out to him and why. On the battlefield, Lu Zi, Zhou Lin, and Baiyu separately launched an attack towards you from 3 directions. They didn't hope to cause any big damage to you. They only hoped to stall you and buy enough time for Yaorao to save Qinchuan. Facing the siege of 3 people, although you didn't fall into disadvantageous position and even occupied the upper hand, but it was somewhat difficult for him to break away from the siege. In the previous battle, In order to kill Holy Emperor, Demon Emperor, and Chang Tian, he had consumed too much divine power, so he needed a certain amount of time to recover. Don't force me. He was extremely angry. Seeing Yao Rao was unceasingly injecting nirvana power into Qinchuan's body, he already couldn't continue to fight with Lu Zi and others, so he wanted to end this battle as soon as possible. Buzz! A gorgeous and dazzling purple-colored light ball gathered in Yu's hand. Then he threw this purple-colored light ball towards the ground. When the ground of Imperial City came in contact with this purple-colored light ball, almost instantly the ground of Imperial City cracked, and the entire planet exploded with a loud bang. Yu's sudden action of exploding the entire planet caught Lu Zi and others somewhat unprepared. Even if they wanted to stop him, it was already too late. And on the other side, Yao Rao and Qinchuan were unexpectedly blasted away by the shock wave of this sudden explosion. Don't! Seeing Qinchuan's body being blasted away by the shock wave, Yao Rao's face immediately exposed a touch of panic and anxiousness. She wanted to go and find Qinchuan. However, the shock wave generated by the explosion of this planet, made her, who had already exhausted her strength, powerless. When Yao Rao and Qinchuan were blasted away, Lu Zi, Zhou Lin, and Baiyu instantly discovered this matter. Baiyu flew towards Yao Rao, and Lu Zi and Zhou Lin flew towards Qinchuan. Just when Lu Zi and Zhou Lin were about to arrive at the side of Qinchuan, someone was one step faster than them and arrived at the side of Qinchuan. When they saw Yu's figure appear at the side of Qinchuan, the complexion of Lu Zi and Zhou Lin suddenly changed. Next moment, they saw Yu ferociously slap Qinchuan, and Qinchuan's body instantly turned into ashes. No! Lu Zi looked on helplessly as Qinchuan was turned into ashes by Yu, and her entire person collapsed. Bastard! Zhou Lin was filled with hatred. She hated Yu, and also hated herself for not being one step faster. Qinchuan! The moment Qinchuan turned into ashes, Baiyu cried out in pain, and tears burst out from her eyes. All their efforts were in vain. Only Yao Rao, she didn't cry, didn't feel any pain. Instead, she laughed heartily in joy. Success! Success! Finally success! At a distant place, after Yu destroyed Qinchuan's body, he thought that all the hidden dangers had been eliminated, but when Yao Rao cried with joy, he had a faint bad premonition in his heart. At this time, at the place where Qinchuan's body was destroyed, a rice grain-sized fiery red light spot slowly appeared. This light spot gradually became bigger and bigger, and when it reached the size of a fist, it changed into an egg. Phoenix egg. At the moment when Phoenix egg appeared, everyone present could feel that an extremely powerful life was being bred inside this egg, a new life called Qinchuan. Chapter 1455. At this very moment, everyone was looking at that fiery red phoenix egg, which was getting bigger and bigger. Some people were happy, and some people were angry. Without destruction, there can be no construction. Only by thoroughly destroying Qinchuan's previous body, he can borrow the power of nirvana to complete his rebirth. Yao Rao very happily explained to everyone. Now Qinchuan is no longer Yu's human nature. Rather, he is his complete self, an independent individual. Hearing Yao Rao, Lu Zi, Zhou Lin, and Baiyu were extremely happy. As long as Qinchuan could be resurrected, then their previous efforts were not in vain. How can I let you succeed? Just when Yao Rao and everyone were extremely pleasantly surprised because of Qinchuan's rebirth, Yu's figure, however, once again appeared beside the phoenix egg. He raised his hand and punched out, wanting to directly smash the phoenix egg and make Qinchuan's rebirth plan fail. But beyond his expectation, this egg actually dodged this punch of Yu. Seeing this scene, everyone's worried heart relaxed. They all knew that although Qinchuan still had not hatched from the phoenix egg, but he already possessed a certain level of consciousness and was able to perceive the matters of the outside world. And from the fact that Yu's punch was not able to hit Qinchuan, who was still inside the phoenix egg, it could be seen that Qinchuan's strength was absolutely not weak. Seeing his punch was not able to hit the phoenix egg, Yu immediately punched out again. This time, Yu was even more serious than before and also used even more strength. Sure enough, this time Qin Chuan was unable to dodge this punch and was hit by Yu's punch. Gotcha! Phoenix Egg suffered a heavy blow, but it didn't directly disintegrate. Rather, fine cracks appeared on its surface. Seeing this, Yu immediately launched a series of attacks in an attempt to break the Phoenix Egg. Upon seeing this, Lu Zi was about to stop Yu, but at this time, Yao Rao sent sound transmission to Lu Zi. Don't attack, Qin Chuan is all right. Hearing Yao Rao's sound transmission, Lu Zi somewhat worriedly said, but what if Yu Zhen breaks the eggshell? Having heard what was said, Yao Rao slightly pursed her lips and said, I can feel that Qin Chuan has already completely recovered. He is merely using the eggshell to consume Yu's power, nothing more. Consumption. Defense? Hearing Yao Rao's explanation, Lu Zi's nervous and perturbed heart finally relaxed. Shortly afterwards, a deep sense of exhaustion welled up in her heart. In the previous fierce battle, she had consumed too much of her energy, so now that she relaxed, she felt her whole body was weak, and even standing in the air was somewhat strenuous. Not only Lu Zi, Zhou Lin, and Bai Yu were also exhausted. Previously, they were only holding on with one breath, but now that they saw Qin Chuan come back to life, their last breath dissipated. We'll leave the rest to Qin Chuan. We can only choose to trust him now. Zhou Lin looked at the Phoenix Egg and Yu, who were entangled together, and smiled softly. Bang! Yu once again punched the Phoenix Egg. This time, the cracks on the eggshell became a lot bigger, and even some broken eggshell fell off. Yu seized this opportunity and used his space divine power to directly solidify the space around the Phoenix Egg. After that, he quickly and violently punched 3 times, and finally completely shattered the Phoenix Egg. The moment the Phoenix Egg was shattered, a figure flew out from inside and ruthlessly bombarded Yu's chest with a ball of lightning. Facing this violent power of lightning, even someone as powerful as you didn't dare to underestimate it. Time Divine Power, Time Backtrack. Along with the appearance of formidable Time Divine Power, that ball of lightning quickly returned to its original path, and at the same time, the injury on Yu's chest also disappeared. Taking advantage of this opportunity, you pulled apart the distance between him and Qin Chuan, and Qin Chuan took out a long robe from God knows where and quickly draped it on his body. After putting on the robe, Qin Chuan glanced at you, then looked at Lu Zi and the others. He smiled and said, Sorry for making you wait. I'm back. At this moment, Qin Chuan could no longer sense the auras of the Holy Emperor, Demon Emperor, and Heaven. He asked everyone, Where are the others? Did they leave? Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Lu Zi shook her head and didn't say anything. However, the sad expression on her face told Qin Chuan where the others went. Looks like they've sacrificed themselves. Qin Chuan sighed, feeling somewhat regretful and guilty. Everything happened because of him, and those who sacrificed themselves could be said to have been implicated by him. This was his fault. I'm really sorry that I didn't come back earlier. Qin Chuan looked around, as if he was looking for the remains of those who sacrificed themselves. His arrogant behavior could be said to have thoroughly angered you. You roared angrily, and his body flickered. In an instant, he appeared in front of Qin Chuan. He condensed a ball of void divine power in his hand and blasted it towards Qin Chuan's chest. Just as he was about to hit Qin Chuan's figure mysteriously disappeared and then reappeared behind you. He lifted his leg and kicked Yu's waist, sending you flying. Whoosh! Qin Chuan quickly caught up to you, who was sent flying, and punched him continuously. He actually treated you like a punching bag, and during this process, you didn't even have the strength to fight back. Bang! Qin Chuan's fist landed on Yu's cheek, and it almost exploded Yu's head. Looking at you, who was sent flying again, Qin Chuan's expression was cold, and his eyes were sharp. He said in a low voice, I didn't go after you immediately. I just wanted to commemorate my comrades who sacrificed themselves. Are you that eager to jump out and die? The current Qin Chuan was domineering, powerful, and cold. It could be said that he was completely different from the previous Qin because the previous Qin was just a part of Yu's human nature and not a complete individual. But now, the new Qin was a complete individual and had nothing to do with Yu anymore. The pain that Yu Chong had inflicted on them in the past, he would return it back to Yu Chong in double. Qin powerful performance shocked everyone at the scene, whether it was Lu Zi, the girls, or Yu. None of them thought that the new Qin would be so powerful, so shocking. This was a great thing for Lu Zi and the girls, but to Yu, it was an unacceptable humiliation. You bastard. Yu's gaze was extremely gloomy as he stared at Qin. It had been many, many years since he was beaten up like this. Qin performance had awakened the extremely unpleasant memories in the depths of his heart. This was almost driving him mad. Qin looked at Yu coldly and said, "Now, it's time to settle the grudges between us." Whoosh! Just when Qin was about to attack, Yu suddenly retreated. He didn't run away, but he went straight for the Creator God's power that was still floating in the air. The current Yu was no longer a match for the new Qin, and the Creator God's power was his last hope. Chapter 1456. When Qin regained consciousness, he had already noticed the Genesis divine energy floating in the air. Such a vast and mighty power was really hard to ignore. When he saw Yu rushing towards the Genesis divine energy, Qin had already guessed Yu's thoughts. Facing a complete and powerful opponent, the Genesis divine energy was probably Yu's last hope. Qin, don't let Yu get the Genesis divine energy. Everyone exclaimed when they saw Yu rushing towards the Genesis divine energy. Although Yu did not succeed in fusing with the Genesis divine energy previously, in this desperate situation, no one knew what other trump cards Yu had up his sleeves. If Yu was allowed to fuse with the Genesis divine energy, even the reborn Qin would not be able to do anything to Yu. Although Qin was very confident in his current strength, he did not want to complicate matters. Therefore, when he sensed Yu's movement, Qin flew towards Yu, ready to stop him. However, Yu had to make the first move, and he was closer to the Genesis divine energy. Qin might not be able to stop him. However, at this moment, a sword light suddenly shot over from afar. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Qin and blocked Qin's path. The runic sword. When he saw the runic sword, Qin's emotions were extremely complicated. He had always thought that he was the chosen one, and that was why the runic sword had recognized him as its master. However, when he found out that the runic sword had always belonged to Yu, and that it had only followed him because he was a part of Yu's humanity, he was really sad and pained. Now, in order to protect Yu from obtaining the Genesis divine energy, the runic sword had blocked his path. "You want to stop me?" Qin looked at the runic sword. At this moment, Yu had already rushed into the Genesis divine energy. He could not stop Yu in time. Hearing Qin's words, the runic sword let out a buzzing sound, and then slowly moved its hilt to Qin's right hand. Seeing this, Qin frowned slightly and said, "Shouldn't your master be you?" "What do you mean by that?" After experiencing the previous events, Qin found it hard to believe in the runic sword. The rune sword did not respond to Qin's question. It only asked Qin to hold the hilt again and again. At that moment, the insectoid queen flew over from afar. She glanced at the runic sword in Qin and said to Qin, "The runic sword has never had an owner. Whether it was in the hands of Kasisna and Zadir when it was first born, or in the hands of you later, it was only a peaceful coexistence, not a master-servant relationship." Hearing the insect queen's words, Qin was curious and asked, "How did you know about this?" The insectoid queen pointed at the runic sword and said to Qin, "We are both divine artifacts. During the previous battle, I obtained this information from him. He should be the one who revealed it to me. Just now, he also revealed his desire to be by your side. That's why I let him fly over." As she spoke, the insectoid queen looked at the Genesis divine energy in the distance and asked worriedly, "Can you stop him?" Qin shook his head. "To be honest, If you had really fused with the Genesis divine energy, he was not confident that he could stop you. Just as Qin Chuan shook his head, the runic sword suddenly flew in front of Qin Chuan. Runes emerged from the runic sword and turned into a golden vortex, revealing a mysterious and ancient aura. Seeing this scene, Qin Chuan understood the meaning of the runic sword almost without thinking. The runic sword wanted to recognize him as its master. Are you sure you want to recognize me as your master and not continue our previous cooperation? Qin Chuan looked deeply at the runic sword. In the past, although he had dripped his blood on the runic sword, it was only to help him establish a spiritual connection with the runic sword. It was not to recognize him as its master. Now, the runic sword expressed that it wanted to truly recognize him as its master and would not leave him. Before he understood why the runic sword made such a decision, Qin Chuan did not want to take this step lightly. He needed a reasonable explanation that made sense. At the same time, an extremely cold voice sounded in Qin Chuan's ears. Qin Chuan, if you want to complete the runic sword and completely repair it, other than the power of the divine runes, you can also borrow the power of your master. Only a complete runic sword has the ability to stop you. Hearing this voice, Qin Chuan could not help but reveal a look of surprise. He looked at the runic sword and asked, "Were you the one who spoke just now?" "Yes." "Have you always been able to speak?" "Yes." "Then why didn't you speak to me before?" "Because you were not qualified at that time." This simple conversation made Qin Chuan understand that although he was powerful in the past, he was only qualified to cooperate with the runic sword. And this cooperation was most likely due to you. Now he was truly qualified to be recognized as the master of the runic sword. Then, why are you willing to recognize me as your master now? This was a question that the runic sword had to answer. The new you, the complete you, has broken free from the shackles and entanglements of you. Your fate will be in your own hands. Hearing the runic sword's answer, Qin Chuan nodded gently and said, "I understand." As he spoke, Qin Chuan placed his finger on the golden vortex. When he cut open his finger and let the golden blood drip into the golden vortex, an extremely mysterious power suddenly descended between Qin Chuan and the runic sword. It was incomparably magical. It was also at this moment that the god of creation's power in the distance suddenly shrank and quickly turned into a light figure. From the shape of the figure, there was no doubt that it was you. When everyone saw this scene, they were extremely nervous. On one hand, it was the new Qin Chuan who had been recognized by the runic sword. On the other hand, it was you who had been recognized by the god of creation's power. Who was stronger and who was weaker would directly affect the fate of the light universe and the dark universe. Ha 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 ha! I did it! I did it! An extremely excited laugh sounded from the light figure. Gradually, the light dissipated, and Yu's figure reappeared before everyone's eyes. Compared to the previous Yu, the current Yu's aura was even more powerful and terrifying. Just one look at him was enough to make people want to worship him. Yu raised his hand and looked at the sparkling bone on his right pinky finger. He smiled and said, "I made the right bet. As long as the god of creation's bone fuses with my body, I can use this bone to fuse with the god of creation's power. Just give me a little more time, and I can truly fuse with the god of creation's power and become a god of creation. Now, it's finally time to settle everything." Chapter 1457. Everyone's expression darkened when they heard Yu's words. Although Yu had yet to become a god of creation, he had already obtained the god of creation's divine power. As long as you could control the god of creation's divine power, he would be no different from a god of creation. On the other side, Qin Chuan and the runic sword were still in the process of recognizing Yu as its master. You also noticed this. When he saw that Qin Chuan and the runic sword were in the process of recognizing each other as its master, he was enraged. "Why? So many years have passed, and I have never been able to gain your approval. I thought that I would be able to gain your approval after I fused with the god of creation's divine power, but you chose Qin Chuan at this time." The fact that the runic sword had recognized Qinchuan as its master diluted Yu's joy of obtaining the god of creation's divine power. Although the runic sword was no longer of much use to him, the feeling of having his beloved item taken away from him made him furious. Go to hell. Die together. Yu raised his right hand and shot a beam of god of creation's divine power at Qinchuan with the help of the god of creation's divine bone. The vast and mighty power seemed to have crossed the distance of millions of miles in an instant and appeared in front of Qinchuan's chest. Just as the god of creation's divine power was about to hit Qinchuan, a golden and chubby figure suddenly appeared and swallowed the god of creation's divine power into its stomach. Wah! Little armored dragon hugged its stomach and stood guard in front of Qinchuan. Its pair of big, cute eyes stared at you in the distance, as if it wanted to take another bite. Delicious, delicious. Little armored dragon cheered and praised the taste of the god of creation's divine power. When everyone saw this scene, their jaws almost dropped to the ground. Even Lu Zi, who was most familiar with Little Armored Dragon, did not expect it to be able to swallow god of creation's divine power. Qinchuan could not help but look at Little Armored Dragon a few more times. Speaking of which, he had been reborn from the phoenix egg. Could this fellow have been reborn with him? However, now is not the time to think about this. He had to focus on establishing a spiritual connection with the runic sword first. How is this possible? The person who was the most shocked to see the Little Armored Dragon devouring the Genesis Shun energy was Yu Shui. As the owner of the Genesis Shun energy, he understood the terrifying power of the Genesis Shun energy the best. The Genesis Shun energy released by the Little Armored Dragon was enough to destroy billions of lives in an instant. However, the Little Armored Dragon devoured the Genesis Shun energy in one gulp. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, he would never believe it. What the hell is this thing? You looked at Little Armored Dragon. He felt that Little Armored Dragon looked like the king of sacred armors, but he didn't think so. Not waiting for you to figure out the origin of Little Armored Dragon, Little Armored Dragon took the initiative to provoke you. He hooked his chubby finger at you and said, "More." When you saw that Little Armored Dragon clearly hadn't had enough, a hint of fear appeared on his face. Before he figured out what kind of species Little Armored Dragon was, and how it had the ability to devour God of Creation Divine Energy, he didn't dare to use his God of Creation Divine Energy on Little Armored Dragon. One had to know that he hadn't become a God of Creation yet. Every bit of God of Creation Divine Energy he used was a little bit less. Who would have thought that after you obtained the Genesis God's power, when he was supposed to go on a killing spree to avenge his humiliation, the Little Armored Dragon actually managed to stop you from making his next move? In this stalemate, the master recognition ceremony between Qinchuan and the runic sword finally came to an end. Buzz. After completing the master recognition ceremony, Qinchuan finally felt that he had truly obtained the runic sword. He could command the runic sword as if it was his own arm. This feeling was completely different from when they worked together previously. At this moment, the runic sword finally borrowed Qinchuan's energy and the half-divine rune's energy to restore itself and return to its peak. In the distance, when you saw that Qinchuan and the runic sword had completed the master recognition ceremony, his heart was filled with anger. Then, something that made him even angrier happened. Little Armored Dragon suddenly opened its mouth and spat out the Genesis Shun energy that it had swallowed earlier. It shot into the distance. I almost couldn't hold it in anymore. Little Armored Dragon stuck out its tongue and looked exhausted. It turned out that Little Armored Dragon did not devour the Genesis Shun energy earlier. It had only temporarily sealed the Genesis Shun energy in its stomach. In other words, Little Armored Dragon's provocation earlier was actually a bluff to scare you. After understanding this, the crowd could not help but look at Little Armored Dragon and you with strange expressions. You who had obtained the Genesis Shun energy was actually scared by a little guy like that. What kind of bad intentions could a Little Armored Dragon have? It only wanted to protect Qinchuan. At this time, you who had understood everything was furious. He hated Qinchuan to the core. He hated little armored dragon to the core. He also hated the runic sword to the core. He wanted to kill all these people who dare to mock him and make fun of him. Kill them all. When you used the Genesis Shun energy to attack Qinchuan again, Qinchuan did not back down. He held the runic sword in his hand, and the god sword was surged. With a slash of the sword, a sharp sword chi shot up into the sky and blocked the attack of little armored dragon's Genesis Shun energy. Looking at this scene, Qinchuan grinned and said, "Although it's a little difficult, it's still blocked. What's the big deal about blocking this?" Just when Qinchuan was feeling happy that he blocked the Genesis Shun energy, Yu's figure suddenly appeared in front of Qinchuan and sent a surge of Genesis Shun energy to Qinchuan's chest. Boom! When the Genesis Shun energy hit Qinchuan's chest, it immediately pierced through Qinchuan's chest. Golden blood splattered across the universe. When everyone saw this, they all turned pale with fright. When Yu succeeded in his attack and wanted to continue attacking Qinchuan, the wound on Qinchuan's chest healed at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it was as good as new. "I have the power of nirvana. I am immortal and indestructible." Qinchuan shouted angrily and slashed at Yu again. The sword light was so dazzling that it almost lit up the entire Void Empire. In front of this majestic and powerful sword, Yu had no choice but to use his Genesis Shun energy to block it. When the power of this sword was completely exhausted, Yu also used up a little of his Genesis Shun energy. This is impossible. The Genesis Shun energy is the strongest power in the world. How can you? Yu's eyes widened as he stared at Qinchuan and the runic sword in Qinchuan's hand. He had never thought that the combination of Qinchuan and the runic sword would be so strong that even the Genesis Shun energy could not do anything to it. Who said that the Genesis Shun energy is the strongest power? Qinchuan looked at Yu with a deep gaze and raised the runic sword in his hand. Bright runes surged out from the runic sword and formed a huge battle armor around Qinchuan. He was like a giant who stood tall and looked down on everything around him. A benevolent heart is invincible. Chapter 1458. At this moment, Qinchuan seemed to have become the center of the universe. Endless power surged out from the runic sword. The runic sea turned into the strongest shield in the universe, protecting one side. The benevolence in Qinchuan's heart was the sharpest weapon in the universe, enough to pierce through everything. At this moment, the residents of the Void Empire raised their heads and looked at the golden giant figure. They couldn't help but feel awe in their hearts, and they prostrated themselves on the ground in worship. At this moment, far away in the bright universe, whether it was the human race, the monster race, the Tian people, the Protoss, or Zerg, all of them looked in the direction of the portal. They could feel an extremely powerful and warm power coming from afar. It was an aura that they were familiar with, and it was also an aura that they respected. At this moment, Chen Chanxing looked up at the starry sky with a determined expression. He said loudly, "Boss is invincible. The benevolent is invincible." At this moment, Tianxin clenched his fists, and tears flowed down his face. He choked with sobs and said, "Qinchuan is invincible. The benevolent is invincible." At this moment, Huichun looked into the distance with a complicated expression. He murmured in a low voice, "Qinchuan is invincible." At this moment, everyone's heart let out a cry that originated from faith. The benevolent is invincible. In the universe, there seemed to be a power that was invisible to the naked eye, gathering and rushing toward the portal. It then entered the dark universe and came to Qinchuan's side, strengthening Qinchuan's power. At this moment, the runic sword carried not only the power of Qinchuan and the runic sword, but also the power of ordinary people and cultivators from all over the world. This was the power of benevolence, the faith of the benevolent. "Kill!" Qinchuan roared and waved the runic sword in his hand. The runic sword fell extremely slowly, but it was extremely firm. Facing this power that seemed to condense everyone's faith, Yu's face became uncontrollably ferocious and crazy. He didn't believe that there was any power in the universe that could compete with the divine power of the Creator. He didn't believe that he would lose. I won't lose. It's impossible for me to lose. The creation God's power is invincible. Yu roared and pointed the Genesis God bone at the sword, activating all of his Genesis God power. He wanted to prove to everyone that the Genesis God power was the strongest power. When the sword of benevolence and righteousness collided with the God of creation's power, the entire universe fell silent. Endless light enveloped the void empire, passed through the portal, and enveloped the entire radiant universe. In this light, the power of benevolence and righteousness warmed everyone's body and soothed their restless hearts. All evils and dangers would vanish. It was as if a century had passed, or even 1,000 or 10,000 years had passed. When the light dissipated, the sea of runes around Qin Chuan had already disappeared. The runic sword seemed to have lost all of its spirituality, turning into a piece of scrap metal. Qin Chuan lowered his head and looked at the rune sword in his hand. It was as if he could no longer feel its existence. When he tried to grasp the hilt of the rune sword to feel its existence, the rune sword suddenly shattered and turned into dust that filled the sky. All greed and anger arose because of me. Now, everything dissipates because of me. Before the rune sword completely dissipated, it left these words in Qin Chuan's ears. It was a long sigh, as if it had seen through the vicissitudes of life and seen through the mortal world. Rest in peace, Qin Chuan murmured in a low voice. Perhaps the disappearance of the rune sword was a good thing. I won't lose. An extremely weak and unwilling voice sounded in Qin Chuan's ears. At this time, after the baptism of the sword of benevolence and righteousness, you had become as thin as firewood. He was spiritless and had reached the end of his life. The Creator's bone had also turned dark yellow and was full of cracks, as if it would shatter at any time. Qin Chuan turned his head and looked at you. Looking at the dense black spots on Yu's face and the pair of extremely unwilling eyes, Qin Chuan said indifferently, I've said it before, the God of creation's power is not the strongest. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Yu seemed to have shattered the last bit of obsession in his heart. His entire body suddenly turned into dust and dissipated. The emperor of a generation, the strongest person in the bright universe, the founder of the rune system, became history. Seeing you fall, Zhou Lin still felt a little incredulous. In this battle, Yu's performance was too strong and too powerful. It made her feel so hopeless that she couldn't see any hope. Now that she suddenly saw Yu Yin disappear, she actually couldn't feel happy. We should be happy. We defeated the enemy, won the victory, and protected the bright universe and the dark universe. LVZ came to Zhou Lin's side. She gently held Zhou Lin's hand and smiled at her. Zhou Lin nodded lightly and whispered, I know we should be happy, but how long can this peace last? Lu Zi smiled and said, I believe that as long as Qin Chuan is still here, this peace will continue. We should believe in him, always believe in him. Hearing Lu Zi's words, Zhou Lin nodded heavily and said to Lu Zi, That's right, we should believe in him. Looking at Qin Chuan, who had completely defeated you and become the new strongest person, Insect Mother had mixed feelings. In order to defeat you, they had sacrificed too many people. Whether it was the Nephilim Emperor, Holy Emperor, or Heaven, they were all worthy of respect. Hey, you won't become someone like you, will you? Insect Mother looked at Qin Chuan. If Qin Chuan also became someone like you, then this universe would really be finished. Hearing Insect Mother's words, Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said, I won't become someone like you. Never. Insect Mother smiled brightly and said, That's good. Then I can go in peace. Qin Chuan looked at Insect Mother with surprise. Facing Qin Chuan's gaze, Insect Mother explained softly, I once promised Bai Xing that we would be together forever. Now that he has fallen, I should follow him. This eternal existence, Whoever wants it can have it. Anyway, I don't care." As she spoke, Insect Mother turned into a puff of smoke and dissipated. The white glove also collapsed and turned into dust. Seeing this, Qinchuan's feelings were extremely complicated. He never thought that he would see such a rare and unwavering loyalty from his former enemy. Compared to such feelings, all the things he had done in the past seemed a little laughable. "Hey, we should go back." A cold voice came from afar, reminding Qinchuan that everything here was over and they should go home. "Yes, it's time to go back." Qinchuan smiled and said, "Let's go home." Chapter 1459. Year 1468 of the New Universe calendar, 5 years after the Battle of the Void Empire's Imperial City. 5 years was not a long time for most cultivators, but for the capital of Starting Point, too many changes had taken place during this period. The rise of the human race and the demon race had become an unstoppable thing. After 5 years of development, many geniuses had emerged in the city of Starting Point, filling the gaps in the backbone of the human race and the demon race. Although the Tian people had lost Chang Tian, the Celestial Emperor had quickly filled the position of zenith left behind by Chang Tian. As for the insectoids, although they did not have any supreme existences, the main culprit who had oppressed the humans and demons was dead. Coupled with the sacrifice of the Saint King and the insectoid queen in that battle, no one took the opportunity to oppress the insectoids. The fall of the Nephilim Emperor did not cause much disturbance to the demons, who were still recuperating. As for when a new zenith existence would be born, no one knew. Although Atheist did not fall in the battle, his vitality was greatly damaged. After returning to the Deus cluster, he lived in seclusion. The one-god religion flourished under the leadership of Pope Saint Baudelaire and God Lord Apollo. Qinchuan, who had contributed the most to the battle, did not stay in the city of Starting Point. Instead, he returned to the Banished Land. In the universe, Qinchuan was a zenith existence that everyone knew. However, in the elven city of the Banished Land, Qinchuan was only a warm and friendly teacher of the Black Moon Combat Academy. 4 years ago, the old principal, Ningya, returned and reorganized the Black Moon Combat Academy. Today, the Black Moon Combat Academy not only accepted students from the humans, but also from the demons. It treated everyone equally. After more than 4 years of development, the Black Moon Combat Academy had become the best academy in the Banished Land. It was the academy that all young people from the humans and demons dreamed of entering. On the other hand, Qinchuan had joined the Black Moon Combat Academy 3 years ago and had officially become a teacher. Qinchuan, today is your 3rd anniversary. Since you're on vacation, let's go gather with everyone. Lu Zi, who was wearing a purple uniform, pushed open the door and walked into the courtyard. She saw Qinchuan lying on a deck chair in the courtyard and threw a bottle of yogurt at Qinchuan. Qinchuan unscrewed the cap of the yogurt bottle and took a sip. Then, he lazily said to Lu Zi, "I just want to lie down and bask in the sun. I don't want to move." Looking at Qinchuan's lazy appearance, LVZ smiled and said, "Teacher asked me to call you. If you don't give me face, are you not going to give teacher face?" Speaking until here, Lu Zi looked at Qinchuan with a subtle gaze and said, "Moreover, there is a new colleague coming today. It can be considered as a new colleague's induction party. It would be inappropriate if you don't go." "Okay." Qinchuan helplessly sat up and said to Lu Zi, "Wait for me." After saying that, Qinchuan got up and walked into the room. After a while, he changed into a well-ironed suit and came out. As a teacher, formal attire was something that must be prepared. Since there was a new colleague coming today, he had to wear formal attire to leave a good impression. Dining hall. "Hello, everyone. I am this semester's new teacher. My name is Yaorao. Please take care of me in the future." In the middle of the crowd, a girl wearing a red dress was standing there. Her delicate and charming face revealed a shallow smile, elegant and generous. Clap, clap, clap. "Welcome, welcome." Along with the voice of Yaorao, the crowd immediately burst into warm applause. As a member of the crowd, Qinchuan was just blankly looking at Yaorao. "Are you surprised?" Lu Zi quietly whispered in Qin Chuan's ear, waking up Qin Chuan from his daze. Qin Chuan looked at Lu Zi with somewhat complicated gaze, as if he was asking Lu Zi what was going on. Facing Qin Chuan's inquiring gaze, Lu Zi said in a low voice, "If you're curious about what is going on, then why don't you go and ask?" Go and ask. Thinking of this, Qin Chuan, who was never afraid, even when facing the strongest opponent in history, at this time, unexpectedly couldn't help but want to shrink back. Qin Chuan was holding a glass of red wine, looking at the graceful figure standing on a balcony, watching the night scene. After hesitating over and over again, he gathered his courage and walked over. That what? Yao Rao turned around and looked at somewhat uneasy Qin Chuan. Don't know why, but seeing Qin Chuan's current appearance, she somewhat wanted to laugh. Could it be that I am more dreadful than you? Qin Chuan shook his head and said, No, there are some words that I don't know how to say. Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Yao Rao deeply looked at Qin Chuan and said, If you don't know how to say it, then don't say it first. Wait until you clearly think about it. Finished speaking, Yao Rao turned around and once again looked at the night scenery outside. Seeing this scene, Qin Chuan suddenly felt as if his feet were rooted to the ground, unable to move forward, also unable to move backward. Just like this, time passed little by little, until Yao Rao once again turned around. Has anyone ever told you that you're a straight man of steel? Yao Rao looked at Qin Chuan with extremely hidden bitterness. She had already done to this extent, but why was this man still so ignorant? Hearing Yao Rao, Qin Chuan clenched his teeth and said, Actually, I heard everything you said. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Yao Rao slightly frowned and asked, What did I say? Qin Chuan took a deep breath and said, 5 years ago, when I almost died, you said, You really still like me. Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Yao Rao couldn't help but gawked. She had never thought that Qin Chuan had actually heard what she had said at that time. But if Qin Chuan had heard it, then why didn't he give any response until now? Facing Yao Rao's puzzled expression, Qin Chuan said in low voice, Actually, I also don't know what I was thinking at that time when I was together with you. It was really a very happy and also a very blessed period of time in my life. Later, because of the differences between leaving and staying, we chose to separate. Speaking till here, Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said, Later, after I was reborn in Nirvana, only then did I know that at that time, I chose to leave and go to the universe. Actually, it was not my original intention. Rather, it was the mysterious attraction of Divinity You, which urged me to make this decision. Even if I had to abandon everything, I must go to the universe. Hearing Qin Chuan's explanation, Yao Rao was somewhat surprised. She had never thought that matter of that time was actually related to you. I know this sounds somewhat nonsense, but I believe you. Yao Rao interrupted Qin Chuan and asked that if you were given another chance, what would you do? Facing this question of Yao Rao, Qin Chuan frankly replied, I would choose to stay. Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Yao Rao somewhat expectantly looked at Qin Chuan and said, So, what are you going to say now? This time, Qin Chuan remained silent. He understood his own intention and also understood Yao Rao's intention, but this didn't mean that he could disappoint Lu Zi. Do you know why I suddenly came here to become a teacher? Seeing Qin Chuan remaining silent, Yao Rao suddenly asked this question. Without waiting for Qin Chuan to ask, Yao Rao herself said, Some time ago, Lu Zi went to Demon World to look for me. She told me one thing. You and her have been together for so many years, but you have never done the thing between man and woman. Hearing Yao Rao, Qin Chuan's complexion immediately turned red. Yao Rao firmly stared at Qin Chuan and continued to ask, Because you are still thinking about me in your heart, so you haven't done that kind of thing with her, right? You feel that if you do that, you will be letting me down and also let her down, right? Facing this series of questions of Yao Rao, Qin Chuan somewhat didn't know how to answer. He felt that he was now a through and through scum who played with other people's feelings and should be pulled out and shot to death. But facing the white moonlight and cinnabar mole in his heart, it was really difficult for him to make a choice. Seeing Qin Chuan's distressed appearance, Yao Rao took a deep breath, then said to Qin Chuan, I am not the kind of person who will easily forgive person. You have once let me down, hurt me, and now you have also hurt Lu Zi, let down Lu Zi. So me and Lu Zi made a decision. We'll leave you together. This time, Qin Chuan was thoroughly dumbfounded. He discovered that not only he couldn't understand himself, he also couldn't understand Yaorao and Lu Zi. Seeing the dumbfounded appearance of Qin Chuan, Yaorao said in a very serious tone, "Now, you can either be a bachelor for the rest of your life, or think of a way to pursue me and Lu Zi at the same time. Otherwise, no matter who it is, none of us will accept you." Qin Chuan was truly dumbfounded this time. This is also possible. But me and Yaorao are already like this. How can you still be like a block of wood? Lu Zi's figure appeared out of nowhere. Then she glared at Qin Chuan, truly somewhat hating iron for not becoming steel. Qin Chuan, very ashamed, said, "After all, I've let you down in the past." Lu Zi interrupted Qin Chuan and said, "That is you's matter. What does it have to do with you, Qin Chuan?" Yaorao nodded her head in agreement and said, "That's right. You are already a reborn Qin Chuan. You's human nature has already died. The matters of the past already have nothing to do with you." Hearing the words of Yaorao and Lu Zi, Qin Chuan felt that if he still couldn't differentiate good from bad, and still couldn't take that step, then he really could go and die. Since by chance coincidence he obtained this kind of opportunity to start over, then this time he will absolutely not let anyone down. End of the book. P.S. There are some words I want to say at the end of the story. This is my first time writing this kind of book. There are many shortcomings, many places I need to learn and improve. I am very grateful to some of my reading friends for their suggestions. Whether it is good or bad review, I will humbly accept it. Thank you all. As for Yaorao and Lu Zi, one is the cinnabar mole that makes people's heart palpitate, and the other is the white moonlight that silently accompanies and protects. To be honest, no matter who it is a kind of sin to let either of them down. But if I want Lu Zi and Yaorao to accompany Qin Chuan without any prejudice, then it is not in line with the character of Lu Zi and Yaorao. So, only after experiencing some tribulations at the juncture of life and death can people see some things clearly and understand some things. For this, I made some foreshadowing, such as the contradiction between leaving and staying. When I was writing this, I didn't think much about it, but after reading the reviews of some friends, I realized that I had thought things too simply. Here, I want to apologize to those friends who were affected by this. My writing of emotional drama was not meticulous enough, not perfect enough, affecting your reading experience. I am really sorry. The final ending is something I have thought about for a long time. I need to give Qin Chuan a reasonable explanation, and at the same time, I also need to give Lu Zi and Yaorao a way out. Perhaps it is somewhat far-fetched and somewhat imperfect, but a story will always leave people with some regrets. Finally, I want to thank everyone for their support and love, and also thank those criticisms. Thank you all. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.